A freezing Appalachian outcast proves the world wrong and reshapes it forever. Stay until the end to see how a 16-year-old girl thrown into the wilderness with nothing becomes the most powerful force in the valley. Like, comment where you're watching from, and let's begin. The cold came first. Not the kind that nipped at your fingers or made you pull your shawl tighter, the kind that reached inside your ribs and squeezed, the kind that whispered you wouldn't see morning. Alara Vance hit the frozen ground hard, her knees cracking against mud turned to stone by December frost. The canvas bag landed beside her with a pathetic thud. Everything she owned in the world reduced to 5 pounds of fabric and failure. Don't come back. The voice belonged to Marcus Tolliver, and it came from somewhere above her, somewhere warm. She didn't look up. Couldn't. Her vision swam with tears she refused to let fall, and her breath came in ragged clouds that dissolved into the gray Appalachian morning like they'd never existed at all. You hear me, girl? She heard. Everyone in Harlan County heard when Marcus Tolliver spoke. His voice carried the weight of 60 years of land ownership, of 300 acres of timber and coal rights, of a name that preceded the Civil War and would outlast anyone foolish enough to challenge it. Alara's fingers dug into the earth. Ice crystals bit into her palms. I said, I heard you. Her voice came out steady. That surprised her. Everything else shook. Her hands, her legs, the foundation of the world itself. But her voice held firm. You made yourself clear. A boot appeared in her peripheral vision, expensive leather, polished despite the mud season. It stopped 6 inches from her face. Clear. Marcus bent down, his joints popping in the cold. See? I don't think you understand what clear means. Clear means you're done. Clear means you don't exist anymore. Your daddy owed me 8 years of work, and the son of a bitch died with 7.5 on the books. Your mama didn't last long enough to finish what he started. She tried. She died. The boot shifted closer. Inconveniently. Left me with a debt and a 16-year-old girl who thinks she's owed something. Alara's jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. I worked. 3 years I worked in your kitchen, in your fields, mucking your stables. Half speed, quarter value. Marcus straightened, his knees cracking again. You're what, 90 pounds? Can't lift, can't plow, can't do a damn thing except read those fool books your father left behind. Knowledge. He spat the word like spoiled meat. Knowledge doesn't plant corn, doesn't pay debts. Behind him, framed in the doorway of the manor house, stood Constance Tolliver, Marcus's wife. She watched with the blank expression of someone observing weather, mildly interested in whether it would rain, entirely uninvested in the outcome. Connie. Marcus didn't turn around. The girl's bag. Make sure there's nothing of ours in it. Constance descended the steps with the careful precision of a woman who'd spent 50 years avoiding scandal. Her hands were pale and soft as she knelt beside the canvas bag, her fingers working the knot with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Tolliver, Alara started. Hush! Constance's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried more command than her husband's shouts ever could. She pulled items from the bag one by one. A spare dress, gray and threadbare. A wool blanket, thin enough to read through. A leather-bound journal, its pages swollen with moisture and use. A small cloth bundle that clinked softly. Constance's fingers hesitated on the bundle. What's that? Marcus stepped closer. Jars. Constance unwrapped it slowly. 3 glass jars, each no bigger than a fist, packed in torn linen. One held dried herbs, another some kind of dark paste. The third was empty, save for a few grains of salt stuck to the bottom. Looks like stealing to me. It's not. Alara lunged forward, but her frozen legs betrayed her. She sprawled face first, her chin catching the edge of a rock. Blood, warm and copper-tasting, filled her mouth. Marcus laughed, not a cruel laugh. That would have been easier to bear. This was genuine amusement, the kind reserved for puppies chasing their tails or children falling in puddles. Stealing. He plucked one of the jars from his wife's hands. What is this? Thievery spices? My mother's. Alara pushed herself up, blood dripping from her split lip onto the frozen earth. She made them. Before. They're mine. Nothing's yours. Marcus held the jar up to the weak morning light. Everything under this roof, everything you touched, everything you used, mine, paid for by my goodwill and your father's broken promises. The jars aren't from your kitchen. The words came out harder now, edged with something that might have been anger or might have been the last gasp of self-preservation. My mother brought them when we came here, 8 years ago. They're older than our debt. Marcus examined the jar like it personally offended him. Then, with casual brutality, he hurled it against the stone foundation of the house. Glass exploded. Dried rosemary scattered across the frozen ground like the world's saddest confetti. Now it's nothing. He turned to his wife. Check the rest. Anything questionable, smash it. Constance's hands trembled, barely, but Alara saw it. The older woman's fingers hovered over the second jar, the one with the dark paste. Mrs. Tolliver, Alara's voice cracked. She hated that, hated the weakness, the pleading note that crept in despite every shred of pride screaming at her to stay silent. Please. It's all I have of her. Please. For a moment, one crystalline, suspended moment, Constance Tolliver's mask cracked. Her eyes met Alara's, and in them swam something that might have been recognition or sympathy or the ghost of every loss she'd ever swallowed in silence. Then Marcus cleared his throat. The mask snapped back into place. Constance wrapped the remaining jars in their cloth, placed them gently in the bag, and pulled the drawstring tight. Nothing of ours, she said softly. Marcus grunted. Get her off my property. I'm going. Alara grabbed the bag, her fingers so numb she could barely feel the canvas. She stood, and the world tilted violently. Her vision grayed at the edges, and she realized with distant clarity that she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. A piece of hardtack, some thin broth. Not enough. Not nearly enough for what came next. Where? The question came from Constance, and it surprised all three of them. Marcus turned. What? Where will she go? Constance's voice remained steady, but her hands twisted together at her waist, a tell Alara had learned to read during 3 years of silent observation. It's December. There's not our concern. Marcus's tone allowed no argument. Town's 6 miles south. She's got legs. The town won't... Constance stopped herself, but everyone knew how the sentence ended. The town won't take her. Not a penniless orphan with no skills and a debt she'd inherited like original sin. Then she'll figure it out. Marcus turned his back, a dismissal more final than words. Or she won't. Either way, she's not my problem anymore. He walked toward the house, his boots crunching on frost. The door opened. Warmth spilled out, lamplight and wood smoke and the smell of breakfast cooking. Then it closed, and the cold rushed back in like it had been waiting. Constance stood frozen, her pale hands still twisted together. Go, she whispered. Not unkindly, just empty. Before he changes his mind about letting you keep the bag. Alara wanted to say something, wanted to spit venom or speak truth or scream until her lungs gave out. But her body had started shaking in earnest now, and she knew if she opened her mouth, the only thing that would come out was a sob. So she turned north. Not toward town, that was south. And south meant people who'd known her parents, who'd watched them work themselves to death in service of a debt that grew faster than they could pay it. South meant pity, or worse, indifference. North meant the ridge, the deep mountains, the places people didn't go because the land was too rough, and the winter too cruel, and the isolation too complete. North meant nothing, but nothing, Alara thought, as her feet found the narrow trail that wound up into the pine forest, was better than this. The first mile passed in a blur of putting one foot in front of the other. The trail climbed steadily, and her breath came harder, white clouds that hung in the still air like evidence of her struggle. The canvas bag felt like it gained a pound with every step, and her thin dress, suitable for indoor work but laughable against December in the high country, might as well have been tissue paper. The second mile, her left boot split. She felt it happen, a pop, then cold seeping through her wool sock as the sole separated from the upper. Each step became a choice. Keep the boot on and let the freezing mud seep in, or take it off and shred her feet on frozen ground. She kept it on. The cold was immediate and absolute. By the third mile, she couldn't feel her toes. The trail narrowed, choked by rhododendron and mountain laurel that clawed at her dress and skin. Thorns drew blood. She didn't stop. Couldn't. Because stopping meant thinking, And thinking meant realizing she had no plan, no destination, no future beyond the next 100 yards of mountain. The sun never really rose. The sky went from black to gray, and weak light filtered through the bare trees like an afterthought. No warmth came with it. Alara's mind started to drift. Not sleep, something worse. A kind of detachment where she watched herself from a distance, a shivering girl climbing a mountain for no reason except that stopping meant dying. Her father's voice drifted up from memory, clear as if he stood beside her. The body can endure more than the mind believes. It's the brain that quits first. Tell your brain to shut up and let your body work. She'd been 8 when he said that. They'd been hauling water from the creek, bucket after bucket in July heat, and she'd wanted to quit. He'd made her finish. Then he'd explained the science of it, muscle fatigue versus mental fatigue, the chemicals that built up and caused pain, the way the brain interpreted those signals and exaggerated them. Pain is information, he'd said. Information can be wrong. Was this pain wrong? Her feet had stopped sending signals an hour ago. Her hands were white-blue, and when she tried to flex her fingers, they barely moved. Her core shook so violently that her teeth chattered in a rhythm she couldn't control. Information can be wrong. But cold was cold. And without shelter, without fire, without food. She crested a rise and stopped. A cliff face rose before her, gray limestone streaked with black, towering maybe 60 feet above the trail. At its base, half hidden by a tangle of dead vegetation, gaped a dark mouth. A cave. Alara stared at it, her brain struggling to process what her eyes reported. She'd grown up in these mountains, knew the stories of caves and sinkholes, and the limestone honeycomb that ran through the ridge like veins. Most were shallow, glorified overhangs that offered minimal shelter. Some went deep, but deep meant danger. Drop-offs. Underground streams. Places you went in and didn't come out. This one looked maybe 10 feet deep? Hard to tell from here, but even a shallow cave was better than nothing. She approached slowly, her split boot squelching with each step. The entrance was narrow. She'd have to duck, but not impossibly so. The air that breathed out was different. Not warm, exactly, but not actively hostile. Still, protected from the wind that had knifed through her dress all morning. At the mouth she paused, her father's voice again. Never enter a cave without light and a way back out. You can't see danger in the dark. She had neither light nor any way back that mattered. Alara ducked inside. The change was immediate. The wind died. The diffuse gray light from outside penetrated maybe 6 feet, then faded to black. She stood still, letting her eyes adjust, and slowly shapes emerged. The cave was bigger than she'd thought. The entrance narrowed quickly, but then opened into a chamber, maybe 15 feet across, with a ceiling that rose to 8 or 9 feet at its peak. The floor was relatively level, covered in fine dust and scattered rocks. No bones, no scat, no sign of bear or mountain lion, no sign of anything except stone and silence. She moved deeper, her hand trailing along the wall. The limestone was dry, not the wet seeping stone she'd feared. The air smelled mineral and old, but not foul. At the back of the chamber, her foot struck something that clunked. She knelt, her fingers exploring in the dimness. Wood. A piece of timber, maybe 3 feet long, weathered smooth. Left by some previous occupant, a hunter, maybe, or another desperate soul who'd found this place and used it and moved on. Or didn't move on. Alara pushed that thought away and kept searching. Her hands found more. Smaller branches, twigs, all dry as bone. Enough for a small fire, if she had a way to light it. The bag. She'd forgotten the bag. Her frozen fingers fumbled with the canvas, finally working it open. The contents spilled onto the cave floor. Dress, blanket, journal, the cloth bundle with the remaining jars. And there, caught in a fold of the spare dress, a small tin box. Her breath caught. She'd forgotten. Her mother's fire kit, flint, steel, char cloth. Ancient technology replaced by matches in most homes. But her mother had kept it, a relic from her own childhood, and taught Alara to use it because you never know when modern convenience will fail. Alara's hand shook so badly she dropped the box twice before getting it open. The char cloth was there, black and fragile. The flint and steel nestled beside it. She'd done this 100 times, Her body knew the motions. Except her hands weren't working right. The cold had turned them into clumsy clubs that could barely grip. First attempt, the steel slipped from her grasp and clattered across the floor. Second attempt, she struck flint to steel but couldn't control the angle. No sparks. Third attempt, a weak spark, but it died before reaching the char cloth. Her frustration built with each failure, and behind it crept something worse, the realization that this might be it. She might freeze to death 20 feet from salvation because her fingers wouldn't cooperate. Work. She said it out loud, her voice strange in the enclosed space. Damn you, work. Fourth attempt, she trapped the steel against her thigh, using her leg to stabilize it. Struck down with the flint. A shower of sparks arced out, and one, just one, landed on the char cloth, a tiny orange glow. Elara brought the cloth to her mouth and blew gently, steadily, the way her mother had taught her. The glow brightened. She tucked it into a nest of the finest twigs and kept blowing, her frozen lips pressed close enough to feel the first hint of warmth. Smoke. Then a lick of flame. She fed it carefully, adding twigs one at a time, building the fire the way you'd build a relationship, slowly, with attention and respect. Too much, too fast, and it would die. Too little, and it would starve. The flame caught, grew. She added larger pieces, and light pushed back the darkness, revealing the full shape of her shelter. Not huge, not comfortable, but dry, protected, alive with firelight. Elara sat back on her heels and started to cry. Not delicate tears, deep, wrenching sobs that tore up from her chest and echoed off limestone walls. 3 years of grief she'd swallowed. 3 years of pretending she was fine, that she could work hard enough to matter, to pay the debt, to earn the right to exist. All of it came out beside that small fire in a cave she'd stumbled into by chance or fate, or the universe's twisted sense of humor. When the tears finally stopped, she felt hollowed out, empty. But in the emptiness was a strange, fragile clarity. She was 16 years old. She had a fire, a cave, 2 jars of her mother's preserves, and a blanket thin enough to see through. Marcus Tolliver's voice echoed in her memory. You're done. You don't exist anymore. Elara looked at the flames, at the way they danced against stone walls that had stood for millennia and would stand for millennia more. No, she said to the empty cave, to the mountain, to herself. I exist, and I'm going to make damn sure the world knows it. She had no idea how, but as the fire warmed her numb hands and the shaking slowly subsided, one thought crystallized with the clarity of frozen water. She would not die here. And more than that, she would not die forgotten. The fire burned through the first night, fed by every scrap of wood she could find in the immediate vicinity of the cave. She'd ventured out twice, once at dusk and once in full dark, feeling her way along the rock face and grabbing anything dry enough to burn. The cold was savage, worse than morning, worse than anything she'd felt before, and both trips left her gasping and shaking so badly she could barely add wood to the flames. But the fire lived, and so did she. She wrapped herself in the thin blanket and pressed as close to the flames as she dared, rotating slowly like meat on a spit, trying to warm all sides of her body evenly. It didn't work. One side would thaw while the other froze, and the transition between the two brought pain, the deep ache of blood returning to tissue that had given up on warmth. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time her eyes closed, her body jolted awake with the animal certainty that sleep meant death. But somewhere in the darkest hours, exhaustion won. She woke to weak daylight filtering through the cave entrance and the fire reduced to coals. Her body screamed, every muscle stiff, every joint protesting movement. Her split lip had scabbed over, and her feet felt like someone had beaten them with rocks. But she was alive, and she was hungry. Not the casual hunger of a missed meal, the deep, gnawing hunger that came from burning every calorie her body possessed just to stay warm. Her stomach felt like it had collapsed in on itself, and when she tried to stand, dizziness swept through her so intensely she had to grab the cave wall. The jars. She crawled to where she'd left them, her movements uncoordinated and desperate. The cloth bundle had come partially undone in the night, and the 2 remaining jars gleamed in the dim light. One held the dark paste, her mother's apple butter, made from the last of their orchard's harvest 3 years ago. The other contained something crystallized in amber, honey, probably, mixed with something else. Her hands shook as she unscrewed the first jar. The seal broke with a soft pop, and the smell hit her like a physical thing. Apples and cinnamon and cloves, and the ghost of a kitchen that didn't exist anymore. She stuck her finger in and scooped out a dollop. The paste was thick and grainy with sugar, and when it hit her tongue, she nearly cried again. Sweet. So sweet it hurt. And underneath, the complex taste of apples cooked down to their essence. The spices her mother had hoarded and used sparingly, the care that had gone into making something beautiful from simple fruit. Alara ate half the jar before reason reasserted itself. This might be all the food she had. Making herself sick wouldn't help. She screwed the lid back on with trembling hands and sat back, the sugar hitting her bloodstream and making her lightheaded. The second jar she left sealed. Not yet. She needed to save something. Outside, the day had dawned clear and brutally cold. Through the cave entrance, she could see her breath crystallizing in the air. The sky was that hard, pale blue that meant no clouds, no snow, no mercy. Just cold pressing down like God's own weight. She needed wood, water, food that wasn't 3-year-old preserves. She needed a plan. But first, she needed to survive the day. Alara spent that day learning the fundamental math of survival. Calories in versus calories out. Every trip outside cost energy, burning precious reserves to move through cold that sapped strength with every breath. But staying inside meant no wood, no water, no chance of finding food. She rationed her movement with the care of a miser counting coins. The first trip. Gather wood from the area immediately around the cave, nothing farther than 50 feet. The second trip, scout for water, ears straining for the sound of a stream. She found it 100 yards down the slope, a trickle, barely more than seepage from the rock face, but flowing and clean. She had nothing to carry it in except her cupped hands, so she drank there. The water so cold it made her teeth ache, then drank more because she had no idea when she'd have the energy to return. The third trip, she pushed farther looking for anything edible. Winter had scoured the forest clean. No berries, no nuts. The squirrels had claimed those months ago. She found wild onions by smell, their green shoots pushing up through leaf litter, and dug them up with her bare hands, the earth frozen except where the sun had touched it. 4 onions. Stringy and small. She ate one raw, the sharp bite making her eyes water, and saved the rest. By nightfall, she'd burned more calories than she'd consumed, and she knew it. The math didn't work. She was still losing. But the fire burned, and the cave was warmer now. The limestone walls had absorbed heat all day and radiated it back, a thermal battery that kept the worst of the cold at bay. Small victories. That night, she opened the journal her father had left behind. It was mostly his. Pages of notes on soil composition, weather patterns, botanical observations written in his cramped, precise hand. But scattered throughout were her mother's additions. Recipes, remedy formulas, household observations written in a flowing script that made Alara's chest tighten. She turned to a page near the middle and read by firelight. December 14th, 1926. Made apple butter from the last of the harvest. E helped. She's 6 and already better at judging the consistency than her father. Says she can feel when it's right. I believe her. Some knowledge lives in the body, not the mind. Her hands know things she can't yet explain. Alara closed her eyes. She'd been 6. She barely remembered that day, just the smell of apples cooking down and her mother's hands guiding hers on the spoon, teaching her to stir in figure eights so nothing scorched. Her hands knew things she couldn't explain. She opened her eyes and looked at those hands in the firelight. Scratched, dirty. The nails broken and bloody from digging in frozen earth. These hands had kept her alive for 2 days. What else could they do? On the third day, she found the limestone shelf. It was pure accident. She'd been exploring the back of the cave, running her hands along the walls in the dim light, when her fingers caught an edge. A natural shelf, maybe 3 feet wide and 5 feet long, jutting from the wall at waist height. Smooth, level, protected from the floor's cold by air and stone. A kitchen counter. The thought hit her so suddenly she laughed, a short, sharp bark that echoed strangely. A kitchen counter. In a cave, like she was going to set up housekeeping in a hole in the mountain. Except, why not? She had fire. She had water nearby. She had shelter. What she didn't have was food, But that was a logistics problem, not a fundamental impossibility. Her mother's voice, reading from the journal she'd just been studying. Some knowledge lives in the body, not the mind. Elara's body knew how to cook, knew how to preserve, knew the science her father had taught her and the intuition her mother had modeled. 3 years in the Tolliver kitchen had honed those skills. She could butcher a chicken, render fat, make something edible from scraps that most people would throw away. But none of that mattered without ingredients. She spent the 4th day hunting, not animals. She had no weapon except a sharp rock, but anything edible the forest might offer. More wild onions. The inner bark of pine trees scraped away from the trunk and boiled until soft. Rose hips, shriveled but still clinging to bare branches. A handful of acorns that hadn't been claimed by wildlife. The acorns were the prize. Bitter with tannins, inedible raw, but her father's notes had a section on leaching them. She boiled them in the empty jar, changed the water 3 times, boiled them again. The process took hours and most of her firewood, but at the end, she had a paste. Nutty, bland, but calories. Actual calories. She ate half and saved half. And that night she slept for 4 hours straight. Progress. But the math still didn't work. She was burning more than she found, and winter had barely begun. In another week, she'd be too weak to forage. In 2, she'd be dead. Unless she changed the equation. On the 5th morning, she made a decision. She would go back down. Not to town, not to the Tollivers, but to the edges of civilization, the places where people dumped things, where waste accumulated, where someone desperate and clever might find what others threw away. It was a 6-mile trek down the mountain to the nearest homestead. She'd have to pass others on the way. People who knew her story, who might help or might turn her away. The prospect terrified her, but less than dying alone in a cave. She wrapped herself in both dresses, the spare one underneath for warmth, and tucked the jars into the canvas bag along with the journal. The fire she banked carefully, building a mound of coals surrounded by the largest logs she'd found, praying it would last until she returned. If she returned. The trail down was easier than the climb up had been. Her body had adapted, the shaking had stopped, and her feet had toughened despite the split boot. But the cold was relentless, and by the time she reached the first homestead, her face felt like carved wood. The house belonged to the Caldwells, a family her father had known, farmers who worked a small plot in the valley. Elara approached from the tree line, watching smoke rise from their chimney and trying to convince herself to walk up and knock. Before she could, the door opened. A woman emerged. Ida Caldwell, maybe 40, rail-thin and hard-eyed. She carried a bucket toward the well, and when she saw Elara standing at the edge of the clearing, she stopped. They stared at each other across 50 feet of frozen ground. "Mrs. Caldwell," Elara called. Her voice sounded strange, rough from disuse and cold. Ida didn't respond immediately. She set the bucket down slowly, her expression unreadable. "Elara Vance." Not a question, a statement of fact, flat and careful. "Yes, ma'am." "Heard you got turned out." Of course she had. News traveled fast in small communities, especially bad news, especially other people's misfortune. "Yes, ma'am." Ida picked up the bucket again and walked to the well. She lowered it, drew water, and set the full bucket on the stone rim. Only then did she look at Elara again. "What do you want?" Direct, no pretense of sympathy or small talk. Elara respected that more than she could say. "Work, food, whatever you can spare in exchange for labor." "Don't need labor. Winter's lean, barely feeding my own." Elara nodded. She'd expected this. "I understand. I'm not asking for charity. If you have anything you're throwing away, scraps, bones, anything, I'll take it. Or if you need something done that's not worth your time but worth a meal, I'll do it." Ida studied her for a long moment. Her eyes took in the doubled dresses, the split boot, the hollow cheeks. "Where are you staying?" The question surprised Elara. "Does it matter?" "Might. If you're sleeping in someone's barn and they don't know it, that's theft. I won't be part of that." "I'm not. I found a place. Up the ridge." "Alone?" "Yes, ma'am." Something shifted in Ida's expression, not quite softening, but a slight relaxation around the eyes. "How old are you now?" 16, 17 in March." Ida shook her head. Christ, your mama would have. She stopped herself, pressed her lips together. Wait here. She disappeared into the house. Elara waited, trying not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment, and disappointment took energy she couldn't afford to waste. Ida returned carrying a small cloth bundle. She walked to the edge of the clearing but didn't cross into the trees where Elara stood. Take it. Don't come back. Elara approached slowly, watching for any sign that this was a trick or a trap. But Ida just held out the bundle, her face grim. Inside, half a loaf of bread, hard as stone but unmoldy. A handful of dried beans. A piece of salt pork no bigger than Elara's palm, most of it fat. A fortune. Mrs. Caldwell, I can't. You can and you will. And you won't mention it to anyone, understand? My husband finds out I gave away food, he'll tan my hide. As far as anyone knows, you never came here. Elara clutched the bundle to her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just survive. Your mama was a good woman. She deserved better than what she got, and so do you. Ida turned back toward the house, then paused. That place up the ridge. You got fire? Yes, ma'am. Keep it burning. Cold's only going to get worse. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a finality that meant the conversation was over. Elara stood in the trees for a long moment, feeling the weight of the bundle in her hands. Not heavy, not enough to change the fundamental math of survival, but enough for today. And tomorrow. And that was something. She visited 3 more homesteads that day. 2 turned her away before she could finish her request. The third, the Hales, who lived closest to town, surprised her. The man who answered the door was older, maybe 60, with skin weathered to leather and eyes that missed nothing. He listened to her request without interrupting, then nodded once. I'm August Hale. You're Jacob Vance's daughter. Yes, sir. Your father knew his plants, helped me identify a blight that would have wiped my whole garden, never asked for payment, said knowledge was meant to be shared. August studied her face. You got his eyes, your mother's cheekbones. Elara didn't know what to say to that. Come inside. Sir, I don't want to impose. Didn't ask if you wanted to. I said come inside. You look like death warmed over, and I'm not having a conversation with a half-frozen girl on my doorstep. The warmth hit her like a wall when she crossed the threshold. Her eyes blurred with sudden tears, and she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of the stranger who'd shown her more kindness in 30 seconds than the world had in 3 years. The house was small but clean, the furniture worn but well-maintained. A fire burned in the hearth, and something simmered on the stove, soup, from the smell of it. Sit. August pointed to a chair near the fire. Not too close. You warm up too fast, you'll pass out. He ladled soup into a bowl and set it on the table, then sat across from her and waited. Elara stared at the bowl. I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to. I mean, I will. Work or when I have... Girl. August's voice wasn't harsh, but it cut through her stammering with the precision of a well-honed knife. Your father did me a kindness. I'm returning it. The universe keeps books better than any banker. Now eat before it gets cold, and then we'll talk about what comes next. The soup was potato and onion, simple but thick, and Elara had to force herself to eat slowly. Her stomach had shrunk, and too much too fast would make her sick. But God, it was good. Hot and real and tasting like life. When she'd finished, August refilled her bowl without comment. While she ate the second serving, he studied her with the careful attention of someone assessing a problem. Where are you staying? She told him about the cave, the fire, the limestone shelf, the daily mathematics of survival. He listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he sat back and crossed his arms. You're building something. It wasn't a question, but Elara nodded anyway. Not just surviving, building. That cave's your foundation. I'm just trying to make it through winter. No. August shook his head. If you wanted to just survive, you'd have gone to town, begged until someone took you in as household help. Wouldn't be pleasant, but it'd be warm and fed. Instead, you climbed a mountain and moved into a hole in the ground. He leaned forward. That's not survival. That's a statement. Elara's hands tightened around the empty bowl. What kind of statement? That you'd rather die free than live on someone else's terms. He smiled, but it was a fierce expression, all teeth in approval. Your father would be proud. Your mother, too. Something in Alara's chest cracked, not broke, but opened, released pressure she hadn't known she'd been holding. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered. Nobody does. That's the secret they don't tell you. Every person who ever built something worth a damn started out fumbling in the dark, hoping the next step wouldn't kill them. August stood and moved to a cupboard. He returned with a cloth sack, heavier than Ida's bundle. Cornmeal, rice, lard, some salt, a few onions, cooking tools, pot pan, knife. Not much, but better than nothing. Mr. Hale, I can't take... Stop saying you can't. You can, you will, and next spring when your cave's a fortress and you're feeding half the valley, you'll remember old August Hale gave you your first real tools. He set the sack on the table with a thud. Now, you know how to render fat? The question caught her off guard. Yes, my mother taught me. Good. Any game you catch or find, squirrel, rabbit, even a crow, you render that fat. Calories and cooking medium in one. Acorns you're already working. Smart. But you need protein and you need it regular. You set snares? No, I don't know how. I'll teach you. Come back tomorrow morning early. I'll show you how to build them from what you find in the forest. Nothing fancy, but effective. He pulled out a small leather pouch and emptied it on the table. Wire, thin and strong. Take this for your first few. When you catch something, study how the snare worked. You'll learn. Alara stared at the pile of supplies. It was too much, too generous. The universe doesn't keep books this carefully, unless it did. Why? She asked. Why help me? August was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands resting on the table. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of history. 30 years ago, I worked the railway, cooked for crews laying track through mountains meaner than these. We lost men regular, cave-ins, rock slides, pure bad luck. One winter, we got snowed in for 6 weeks. Supplies ran out after 4. We were starving, and the boss said we'd have to wait for spring thaw. He paused, his eyes distant. A Shoshone woman showed up out of nowhere. She'd been watching us, I guess. Saw we were in trouble. She taught us to find food where we saw nothing. Bark, roots, insects. Showed us how to preserve what we caught, how to make a fire burn longer on less wood. She didn't speak English, and we didn't speak Shoshone, but knowledge translates. His eyes refocused on Alara. She saved 30 men that winter. When spring came and we tried to thank her, to pay her, she refused. Pointed at us, pointed at the mountain, made a gesture like... He swept his hand outward, like spreading something. Took me years to understand. She wasn't asking for payment. She was asking us to pass it on. August tapped the table. So I am. I see a girl with your father's brains and your mother's hands, building something in a cave on a mountain, and I think, this is how it gets passed on. Not hoarded, not sold, shared. He stood. You take these supplies, you learn, and when someone else needs help, you do the same. That's the payment. Alara felt tears threatening again and swallowed them back. Yes, sir. Good. Now get that stuff back to your cave before the cold kills you. And tomorrow, early, we work on snares. She packed the supplies into her bag, the weight making her stagger when she lifted it. But it was a good weight, the weight of possibility. At the door, she turned back. Mr. Hale? That woman, the Shoshone woman. Did you ever see her again? No, never knew her name even, but I never forgot her. He smiled. And now neither will you. The climb back up the mountain was brutal. The bag was heavy, and full dark had fallen, and the temperature was dropping fast. But Alara climbed with a steady determination that had nothing to do with desperation and everything to do with purpose. She had food, she had tools, she had knowledge, and tomorrow she'd learn to hunt. When she reached the cave, the fire was still alive. Barely, just coals, but alive. She fed it carefully, building it back to flames, and then she unpacked her treasures one by one. The pot, the pan, the knife, old but sharp, the handle worn smooth by decades of use, the cornmeal and rice and precious lard, and the wire for snares. She arranged it all on the limestone shelf, and in the firelight, it looked almost like a real kitchen. A strange kitchen, built in stone and lit by flames, but real nonetheless. That night, she made her first meal from scratch in the cave. Cornmeal mush cooked in the pot with water and a pinch of salt, sweetened with a dollop of her mother's apple butter. It was simple, basic, the kind of food that would never grace a table in town. But she'd made it with her own hands, in her own space, owing nothing to anyone. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, and when she finished, she sat back and looked at the fire and the walls and the shelf that was slowly becoming more than just stone. Marcus Tolliver's voice echoed in her memory. "You don't exist anymore." Alara smiled. "Watch me," she said to the empty cave, to the mountain, to the world beyond. "Just watch me." The next morning, she rose before dawn and made the trek back to August Hale's homestead. He was waiting outside, 2 steaming mugs in hand. "Coffee." He handed her one. "Not much sugar, but it's hot." The coffee was bitter and scalding and perfect. They drank in companionable silence as the sky lightened from black to gray. "You eat?" August asked. "Yes, sir. Cornmeal." "Good. You'll need energy. We're going to cover a lot of ground." He set his empty mug on the porch rail. "First lesson, the forest provides, but you have to know where to look and what to take. Taking too much is theft, from the land, from the animals, from next season's growth. Taking too little means you starve. The trick is finding the balance." They walked into the woods, and August began pointing out things Alara had walked past 100 times without seeing. The runs where rabbits traveled, marked by tiny tracks and droppings. The places where squirrels cached nuts, betrayed by disturbed earth. The scratches on tree bark where deer rubbed velvet from their antlers. "The forest is having a conversation," August said. "Most people walk right through it, deaf to every word. You want to survive here, you learn to listen." He showed her how to build a snare, choosing the right sapling for spring tension, setting the wire loop at the perfect height, disguising it with dead leaves so prey wouldn't spook. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, and he talked her through each step. "The wire's a gift, understand? Most people can't afford it, and it won't last forever. Learn to do this with cord made from bark or sinew. Learn the knots that hold under tension. Wire makes it easier, but knowledge makes it possible." Alara watched, memorized, asked questions. August answered patiently, and when she tried to build her own snare, he corrected her mistakes without judgment. By midday, they'd set 6 snares along game trails. "Tomorrow, you check them," August said. "Might have something, might not. Either way, you learn. You see what works and what doesn't, and you adjust." He started walking back toward his homestead. "Come on, I'll show you preservation next." In his small smokehouse, he demonstrated how to cure meat with salt, how to build a low fire for smoking that wouldn't cook the meat but would dry it and flavor it. He showed her his root cellar, dug into the hillside, staying cool even in summer, cold in winter without freezing. "Environment does half the work if you let it," he said. "This cellar keeps vegetables for months. Your cave could do the same. The trick is controlling airflow and moisture." He gave her a burlap sack of turnips and carrots, slightly soft, but still good. "Practice. Figure out how to store these so they last. Experiment. Fail. Learn." Alara's head spun with information, but it was a good spin. She felt like a vessel being filled after years of running dry. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, August walked her back to the trail that led up the mountain. "You're going to be all right," he said. "You've got something most people don't, the willingness to learn and the courage to try. That's more valuable than any amount of wire or cornmeal." "Thank you," Alara said. The words felt insufficient, but they were all she had. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me in spring when you've made it through." He turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and Alara? Don't go down to town. Not yet. Let them wonder what happened to you. Let them assume you didn't make it. There's power in being underestimated." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing at the trailhead with a sack of root vegetables and her mind churning. The climb back was easier now. Her body had adapted to the exertion, and the path was becoming familiar. When she reached the cave, the fire was still burning, and home didn't feel like quite such a strange word for this place. She spent the evening arranging the root vegetables in the coolest part of the cave, experimenting with how to stack them for airflow. Some she buried in the dust floor, covering them lightly. Others she left exposed. She'd check them daily and see what worked. Science. That's what her father would have called it. Empirical observation. That night, she cooked rice in the pot. more than she needed, deliberately, because August had mentioned that cooked rice could be reheated or eaten cold, and making extra was efficient. As she ate, she paged through her father's journal, looking for anything about food storage or preservation. She found a section on fermentation, her mother's handwriting mixed with his, describing how to make sauerkraut and pickles. No cabbage, no cucumbers. Wrong season. But the principle was sound, beneficial bacteria preserving vegetables through acid production. She could apply that to whatever she found, if she found the right conditions. Ideas began connecting in her mind, forming chains of possibility. The cave was cool. The limestone would regulate temperature. If she could find salt, there was a salt lick August had mentioned, used by deer, she could preserve meat long term. If she could ferment vegetables, she could have vitamin C through winter, preventing scurvy. Each problem she solved opened 3 more, but they were solvable problems. Engineering challenges, not insurmountable obstacles. She fell asleep that night with the journal open on her chest and her mind mapping supply chains, preservation methods, efficiency improvements. Marcus Tolliver had thrown her away, deemed her worthless. He'd given her the greatest gift imaginable, absolute freedom to prove him wrong. The snares yielded their first catch on the 3rd day. A rabbit, young and lean, but meat nonetheless. Alara found it still warm, caught cleanly around the neck. Death had been fast. That mattered to her, though she couldn't articulate why. She'd never killed anything before, never butchered. But her mother's voice was clear in her memory, walking her through the chickens she'd prepared in the Tolliver kitchen. Quick and respectful. No waste. Honor the animal by using every part. Her hands shook as she field-dressed the rabbit, but the knife August had given her was sharp, and muscle memory from watching her mother took over. Skin. Internal organs, heart, liver, kidneys set aside. The rest buried deep so scavengers wouldn't associate her snares with food. Carcass rinsed in the cold stream. Back at the cave, she built up the fire and rendered the fat first, cutting it into small pieces and heating it slowly in the pan. The smell was rich and slightly gamey, and when the fat had liquefied and the cracklings turned golden, she strained it into one of her jars. Rabbit fat, liquid gold. The meat she cut into pieces and browned in its own fat, then added water and wild onions and a turnip diced small. The pot simmered for hours, filling the cave with smells that made her stomach clench with anticipation. When it was done, the meat was tender enough to pull apart with her fingers, and the broth was rich with fat and minerals. She ate half and saved half, the warm food settling into her belly with a satisfaction she'd almost forgotten existed. She was gaining weight back. Not quickly, but steadily. Her ribs were less prominent. Her hands were stronger. The constant shaking had stopped. The math was starting to work. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Check snares at dawn. Forage for anything edible. She'd found a persimmon tree, the fruit frozen but sweet after thawing by the fire. Tend the fire. Cook. Store. Learn. August visited once a week, always bringing something useful. A second pot, a whetstone for sharpening the knife, a length of rope. They'd talk preservation methods and cooking techniques, and he'd share stories from his railroad days. Not just survival, but the community that had formed among the workers. The way shared hardship created bonds stronger than blood. People think survival is a solo act, he said during one visit. It's not. It never has been. Humans survived because we cooperated, shared knowledge, took care of each other. The lone wolf dies. The pack survives. Alara thought about that as January deepened and the cold became something so constant she stopped noticing it as separate from existence. She was alone on this mountain, yes, but she wasn't isolated. August's weekly visits. The supplies from Ida Caldwell, who'd left another bundle on a stump at the edge of her property, unacknowledged but unmistakable. A pack of sorts. Scattered and silent but present. And then, on a morning so cold the air itself felt brittle, everything changed. Alara was checking her snares moving through the pre-dawn gray with the efficiency of practice when she heard voices. She froze. Voices meant people, and people meant complications she wasn't ready to handle. Slowly, carefully, she moved toward the sound. 2 figures came into view, a woman and a child, maybe 8 years old. They moved slowly, the woman supporting the child who limped badly. Both were dressed in threadbare clothes that provided no real protection from the cold. The woman stopped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The child, a boy, was crying silently, tears freezing on his cheeks. Alara watched from behind a rhododendron thicket, every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden. These weren't her people, weren't her problem. She had barely enough for herself. The woman sank to her knees, pulling the boy close. "Almost there, baby. Almost there." But the boy's lips were blue, and his shaking had taken on the slow, distant quality that Alara recognized from her first days in the cave. Hypothermia. Advanced. The woman was lying. They weren't almost anywhere. They were dying. Alara stepped out from behind the thicket. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear and desperate hope. "Please," she whispered. "Please, my son. We need—" "Follow me," Alara said. She led them up the mountain, to the cave, to the fire that burned low but steady. The woman stumbled twice, but she kept moving, kept half-carrying her son. At the cave entrance, Alara stopped them. "He needs to warm up slow. Too fast will make it worse." She'd learned that the hard way her first night. She positioned the boy near the fire, but not close, wrapped him in her blanket, both blankets now, she'd made a second from a deer hide, and heated broth from last night's rabbit. The woman watched with the desperate attention of someone whose entire world had narrowed to this moment. "Drink," Alara said, offering the broth to the boy. "Small sips. Let it warm you from inside." He drank, coughed, drank more. Color started returning to his face, and his shaking intensified, a good sign, his body fighting back. The woman finally allowed herself to collapse, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you. What happened?" Alara kept her voice steady, but her mind was racing. 2 more people meant food consumption she hadn't planned for. How long would they stay? Could she afford to feed them? "My husband," the woman's voice broke. "He worked at the mill. Got hurt. Couldn't work. Lost the house. We've been moving, looking for somewhere, anywhere." She looked at Alara with hollow eyes. "Everyone said there was nothing up here, that the mountain was empty." "It's not empty," Alara said quietly. The boy had fallen asleep, his breathing even now, the worst of the danger past. The woman stared at the cave, the fire, the shelf with its pots and jars, the organization that spoke of permanence. "You live here," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." "How?" The woman gestured helplessly. "How are you? You're just 16, Alara finished. 17 in March." Silence. Then the woman started laughing, a broken, slightly hysterical sound. 16, Christ, when I was 16, I could barely boil water without burning it." She looked at Alara with something like wonder. "Who are you?" And Alara realized she didn't have an answer to that question anymore. She wasn't the desperate girl Marcus Tolliver had thrown out, wasn't the orphan begging for scraps, wasn't anybody's kitchen help or daughter or debt. She was whatever she chose to be. "I'm Alara," she said simply, "and you're safe here, for now." The woman closed her eyes, and fresh tears leaked out. "My name's Sarah. Sarah Winters. This is my son, Thomas." "Nice to meet you, Sarah." Alara ladled more broth into a second cup. "Now drink this before you freeze too, and then you're going to tell me everything, where you came from, what you need, how long you can stay. Because I can help, but I need to know what I'm working with." Sarah took the cup with shaking hands and drank like she was dying of thirst. When she finished, she wiped her mouth and met Alara's eyes. "We need—" She stopped, recalibrated. "We need safety, food, warmth, just until spring. Then we'll move on, find work, somewhere my boy can grow up without—" Her voice cracked again. Alara looked at Thomas, sleeping peacefully now, his small face relaxed in a way that suggested he hadn't felt safe in a very long time. The math had been working, barely, for one person. 2 more would break it, unless she changed the math. "I can't feed you through winter," Alara said bluntly. "I don't have enough, but I can teach you how to feed yourselves. And if you work with me, if we pool resources and knowledge, we might all make it." Sarah stared at her. "You'd do that? For strangers?" Alara thought of August Hale, of the Shoshone woman he'd never met again, but never forgot. of knowledge passed like fire from hand to hand, never diminishing, only spreading. "You're not strangers," she said. "You're people who need help. That's enough." And in that moment, as Sarah Winter's face crumpled with relief and gratitude, as the fire crackled and the stone walls held back the killing cold, Alara felt something shift. She'd been surviving. Now she was building. And the foundation, this cave, this fire, this choice to help instead of hoard, would hold more weight than she could possibly imagine. She just didn't know it yet. Will Alara's gamble to help Sarah and Thomas pay off? Or will it doom them all? Can one girl's knowledge really feed 3 mouths through an Appalachian winter? And when word spreads about the strange sanctuary hidden in the mountains, who else will come climbing that frozen trail? The real test is just beginning. Sarah Winters slept for 16 hours straight. Alara watched her from across the cave, feeding the fire and rationing the remaining broth into portions that wouldn't sustain 3 people for more than 2 days. The math screamed at her, every calculation ending in the same cold equation. Not enough, not even close. Thomas woke first, his eyes opening slow and confused in the firelight. He stared at the stone ceiling, then at Alara, and his small body went rigid with the animal tension of a creature that had learned to expect danger. "Your mother's sleeping," Alara said quietly. "You're safe." The boy didn't relax. His eyes tracked her movements as she stirred the fire, and when she stood to add wood, he flinched. "I'm not going to hurt you. That's what they said." His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Before." Alara's hand stilled on the wood. "Who's they?" Thomas pulled the blanket tighter around himself. "The people. The ones who said they'd help. They took Mama's ring. Said we could stay in their barn. Then they locked us in and—" He stopped, his jaw working. "And what? Said we had to earn it. Mama tried. She worked all day. But the man—" His small hands clenched. "He said Mama had to do other things too. Things that made her cry." The wood in Alara's hand snapped. The crack echoed through the cave, and Sarah jolted awake with a gasp. "Thomas!" She scrambled toward her son, eyes wild, her body positioning itself between him and Alara. "Baby, are you—" "I'm okay, Mama." Sarah's eyes found Alara, and in them was a wariness so deep it had worn grooves into her soul. "What did he tell you?" "Enough." Alara set the broken wood carefully onto the fire. "You need to eat, both of you. Then we talk." She heated the last of the broth and divided it into 2 portions, gave Sarah and Thomas each a cup, and watched them drink with the desperate focus of people who'd forgotten what full felt like. When they finished, Sarah set her cup down with shaking hands. "We should go. We've imposed enough." "You'll die." The bluntness made Sarah's eyes snap up. "Excuse me?" "It's 12 degrees outside. You have no supplies, no shelter, and your son's still recovering from hypothermia." Alara's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "You walk out of here now, you'll both be dead by nightfall. Is that what you want?" Sarah's face hardened. "Don't you dare—" "I'm not judging. I'm stating facts." Alara leaned forward. "You want to leave, leave. But don't pretend it's about imposing. It's about fear. You're scared I'll turn out like those people, the ones who hurt you." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Thomas pressed against his mother's side, and Sarah's breathing had gone shallow and rapid. "You don't know anything about us," Sarah said finally. "I know you're running. I know you've been hurt. I know you're about 10 seconds from bolting because staying feels more dangerous than freezing." Alara stood and walked to the cave entrance, looking out at the pale winter morning. "I also know I just used the last of my food to feed you, so if you leave, I'm back to square one anyway." She heard Sarah shift behind her. "Why would you do that?" "Do what?" "Give us your last food. You don't owe us anything." Alara turned back. Sarah was standing now, her thin frame wrapped in clothing that had been nice once, before desperation wore it to rags. Her face was gaunt, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness and fear, but beneath the damage was something fierce. A mother's rage at a world that had failed to protect her child. "No," Alara said. "I don't owe you anything, but I remember what it feels like to be thrown away, to be told you don't matter." She paused. "Someone helped me. Now I'm helping you. That's all it is. Nothing's that simple." "It is if you let it be." Sarah laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You're what, 16, 17? You don't know how the world works. I know I'm alive in a cave in December with no money and no family, and I'm still breathing. Alara's voice went hard. So yeah, maybe I don't know how the world works, but I know how I work, and I don't leave people to die when I can help. Thomas was watching them both, his eyes moving back and forth like he was watching a tennis match. His small voice cut through the tension. Mama, I'm hungry. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her face crumpled, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. I know, baby, I know. I have cornmeal, Alara said, and some rice, enough for breakfast. After that, she shrugged, we figure it out. Sarah's eyes met hers, searching for the trap, the angle, the inevitable betrayal. When she didn't find it, confusion flickered across her features. Why? She whispered. Because I can. Alara moved to the limestone shelf and pulled down the cornmeal. And because alone, we're all going to fail. Together, we might survive. She started mixing cornmeal with water, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Sarah watched for a long moment, then moved to her side. I can cook, I know, but this is my kitchen, my supplies, my fire, so I cook. Alara didn't look up from the mixing bowl. You want to help, you can gather wood. There's a stack outside the entrance. Bring it in, stack it by the fire. That's useful. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she nodded and moved toward the entrance. Thomas started to follow, but Alara stopped him with a word. Not you. You're still weak. Sit by the fire and warm up. The boy hesitated, looking between Alara and his mother. Sarah gave him a small nod, and he settled back by the flames, his eyes never leaving Alara's hands as she worked. You really live here? He asked. By yourself? Yes. Aren't you scared? Alara considered that as she added salt to the mixture. Of what? Bears, wolves, the dark. Bears are hibernating, wolves avoid people, and the dark, she glanced at him. The dark is just the absence of light. It can't hurt you. Mama says monsters come out in the dark. Your mama's trying to keep you close and safe. That's not the same as truth. Alara poured the mixture into her pan and set it over the fire. The real monsters walk around in daylight. They look like regular people. They smile and offer help, and then they take things that aren't theirs to take. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, like the man with the barn? Yeah, like him. Are you a monster? The question should have surprised her. It didn't. Alara met the boy's eyes, old eyes in a young face, aged by experiences no child should have. I don't know, she said honestly. Ask me again in a month. See if I've earned your trust or broken it. Sarah returned with an armload of wood, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She'd heard the last part of the conversation, and her expression was unreadable as she stacked the logs. They ate in silence, three people who didn't know each other, sharing space and food, and the fragile warmth of a fire that would die if they stopped feeding it. When the meal was done, Alara stood. Rules. If you're staying, you need to know them. Sarah's back straightened. Rules. Yes, first, the fire doesn't go out. Ever. Someone's always watching it. We'll rotate shifts. Fine. Second, no waste. Every scrap of food, every bone, every piece of fat, we use it all. Nothing gets thrown away. Understood. Third, you don't touch my things without asking. The jars, the journal, the tools, mine. You want to use something, you ask first. Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. Anything else, Your Highness? Alara ignored the sarcasm. Fourth, you pull your weight. I'll teach you to forage, to set snares, to preserve what we catch. But I'm not your servant, and this isn't charity. You work or you leave. I've been working since I was 12 years old. Don't lecture me about pulling weight. Then we won't have a problem. Alara moved to the cave entrance. I'm checking my snares. You two stay here. Keep the fire going. I'll be back in an hour. Wait. Sarah stood. You're just leaving us here? With your supplies? Alara turned back, her expression flat. You going to steal from me? No, but then why does it matter? She pulled on her second dress for warmth. Trust has to start somewhere. Might as well be now. She walked out before Sarah could respond, disappearing into the gray morning. Sarah stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the cave entrance. Thomas moved to her side. Mama? She's strange, Sarah whispered. She gave us food. I know. Sarah looked around the cave, at the organized shelf, the carefully banked fire, the root vegetables stored in the corner. She's also a child playing house in a hole in the ground. She doesn't seem like she's playing. No, she didn't. That was what unsettled Sarah most. Alara Vance moved with the confidence of someone twice her age, spoke with the directness of someone who'd stopped caring what people thought, and organized her space with the precision of someone who understood that chaos meant death. Sarah had met a lot of people in the past 6 months. Desperate people, cruel people, people who smiled while they sharpened knives. But she'd never met anyone quite like the girl who'd just walked out into the freezing morning without a backward glance. Mama, can we really stay? Sarah looked at her son, at his too thin face and the hope flickering in his eyes like a candle in wind. She thought about the alternative, walking back down the mountain into a world that had chewed them up and spit them out. I don't know, baby, she said softly, but for now, we're here. So let's make ourselves useful. But Alara returned an hour later with 2 squirrels, already field-dressed, and found Sarah had reorganized the entire woodpile and Thomas had swept the cave floor with a makeshift broom made from pine branches. She stopped in the entrance, taking in the changes. The wood was stacked more efficiently, smaller pieces at the bottom for kindling, larger logs on top. The floor was cleaner and someone had moved the water pot closer to the fire. You rearranged my cave. Sarah looked up from where she was tending the fire. The woodpile was inefficient. You were wasting space. It worked fine. Fine isn't optimal. Sarah's voice carried an edge. You said no waste. That includes wasted space. They stared at each other across the fire. Thomas had stopped sweeping, his eyes darting between them. You're right, Alara said finally. She held up the squirrels. These need to be skinned. You know how? I've butchered chickens. Same principle, smaller scale. Alara tossed her the knife. Sarah caught it reflexively, her eyes widening. Skin them, save every scrap. I'll start the rendering pot. Sarah stared at the knife in her hand. You're trusting me with a weapon? It's a tool. Only becomes a weapon if you make it one. Alara was already moving to the fire, her back to Sarah. Are you planning to stab me? No? Then it's a tool. She set the pot over the flames. Get to work. Sarah's hands tightened on the knife handle. Then, slowly, she knelt and began working on the first squirrel. Her movements were unpracticed but careful, and Alara watched from the corner of her eye while preparing the rendering pot. Higher on the legs, Alara said. You're leaving meat on the bone. Sarah's jaw clenched, but she adjusted her cut. Like this? Better. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackle of fire and the wet work of butchering. Thomas had settled in a corner with the journal. Alara had given him permission with a look and was carefully turning pages, studying the drawings and notes with intense concentration. Your father's? Sarah asked, nodding toward the boy. My father's and mother's. They're both dead. I'm sorry. Don't be. They taught me what I needed before they left. Alara added fat scraps to the rendering pot. What about Thomas's father? Sarah's knife paused mid-cut. What about him? You mentioned a husband. He with the living or the dead. Does it matter? Only if he's going to show up looking for you. Sarah resumed cutting, her movement sharp. He's alive, far as I know. Haven't seen him in 3 months. He leave or did you? I did. After he lost his job and started drinking and decided his fists were a better tool than his brain. Sarah's voice was flat, emotionless. Took Thomas in the middle of the night. Been moving ever since. Alara nodded, adding the information to her mental ledger. You know where you are? Nobody knows where we are? That's the point. Good. Means I don't have to plan for unexpected visitors. She stirred the rendering pot. But if he shows up, you handle it. This is your cave too, but your problems stay yours. I won't fight your battles. Sarah looked up sharply. Awful generous of you. It's practical. I help with survival. Everything else is personal. Alara met her eyes. You want protection from your husband? You learn to protect yourself. I'll teach you to fight if you want. But I won't do it for you. You're 16. And I'm alive in a cave in December with strangers I'm feeding. What's your point? Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. She went back to skinning the squirrel, but her movements had tension in them now. Anger, barely controlled. You got a problem, say it, Elara said. You're a child. So? So stop acting like you're running some kind of empire up here. This is a cave. You're squatting in it. That doesn't make you queen of the mountain. Alara's expression didn't change. You're right. I'm 16 and living in a hole. I also saved your son's life yesterday, and I'm teaching you to survive winter. So which matters more, my age or my usefulness? Both matter. Why? Because, Sarah threw down the half-skinned squirrel. Because you're acting like you have all the answers when you're barely older than my son. Because you speak in these flat little pronouncements like you're some kind of sage. Because it's unsettling watching a teenager behave like she's 40. Would you prefer I cry, beg, act like a child? Elara's voice stayed level. Would that make you more comfortable? It would make you more human. Being human got my parents killed by debt. Being human got you locked in a barn by someone who smiled while he hurt you. Elara stood and moved to the rendering pot, checking the temperature. I tried being human. It didn't work, so I became something else. What? A monster? Practical. Thomas's voice cut through the tension, small but clear. Mama, stop. Sarah turned to her son. Thomas, she helped us. She's still helping us. Why are you being mean? I'm not being mean. I'm being realistic. You're scared. Thomas's eyes were too knowing, too old. You're always scared now. But she's not like the barn man. Can't you see that? Sarah's face crumpled. She covered it with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Thomas went to her, wrapped his small arms around her waist, and she held him like he was the only real thing in the world. Elara finished stirring the rendering pot and added wood to the fire. When Sarah finally looked up, eyes red and swollen, Elara was sitting cross-legged by the flames, the finished squirrels roasting on a spit. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. For what? For... She gestured helplessly. All of it. You saved us and I attacked you. You didn't attack me. You pushed back. That's different. Elara turned the spit. And you're right. I am a child. But I'm also the only thing between you and freezing to death, so we both have to live with the contradiction. Sarah laughed, short and sharp and slightly hysterical. You talk like a book. I read like one too. My father made sure of it. Elara checked the meat. Almost done. While it cooks, I need to explain something. What? This? She gestured at the cave, the fire, the supplies. This works because I keep it organized. I know where everything is. I know how much we have and how long it'll last. You rearranging things feels helpful, but it disrupts my system. I was trying to... I know, and I appreciate it. But in a space this small, with resources this limited, predictability matters. I need to know that when I reach for something, it's where I left it. Elara met Sarah's eyes. So here's the new rule. You want to change something, you ask first. I'll probably say yes. But you ask. Sarah's jaw worked. And if I say no, then we have a problem. Elara's voice was quiet but iron hard. Because this is my space. I found it. I built it. I'm sharing it because I can, not because I have to. Push too hard and I'll stop sharing. You'd throw us out? I'd give you a choice. Work with my system or work outside it. But I won't let you dismantle what I've built just because it makes you uncomfortable that someone younger is in charge. The words hung in the air like smoke. Thomas had gone still against his mother's side, and Sarah's breathing had gone shallow. You're serious. Completely. You'd let us die over a woodpile arrangement? No, I'd let you choose death over accepting help on terms you don't like. There's a difference. Elara pulled the spit from the fire and set the cooked squirrels on a flat stone to cool. I'm not your enemy, but I'm not your servant either. We're partners or we're nothing. Your choice. Sarah stared at her for a long, tense moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Partners. But partners talk to each other. Equals. Not orders from on high. Agreed. As long as you understand that when it comes to survival decisions, what we eat, how we preserve, where we store, I have more experience. So my suggestions carry weight. Fine, but you're not always right. Never said I was. Just said I've kept myself alive so far. Alara started dividing the meat. Prove me wrong, and I'll listen. Sarah took the portion Alara offered, and they ate in silence that felt less hostile than before. Not friendly, not trusting, but workable. When the meal was finished, Alara stood. I'm going to check the snares again. Thomas, you come with me. Time you learned how they work. Thomas looked to his mother, who hesitated, then nodded. Don't go far. We won't. Alara led the boy out into the cold morning. The sun had risen higher now, but it brought no warmth, just pale light that made the frost glitter like broken glass. Why did you bring me? Thomas asked. Because you need to learn, and because your mother needs time alone to think. Alara moved along the game trail, checking each snare. She's not wrong to be scared. The world hurt her, hurt you. Being careful makes sense. But careful can become paralyzed, and paralyzed means dead, especially up here. She knelt by a snare, empty, and reset it. Watch. See how I position the loop? Thomas crouched beside her, his small hands mimicking her movements. Like this? Close, higher, rabbit's going to be moving fast. You want the wire at neck height when it's running. He adjusted, and Alara nodded approval. Good, now disguise it. They worked together, covering the wire with dead leaves and pine needles until it was nearly invisible. Thomas's face was intent, focused in a way that suggested he was grateful for something concrete to do. Can I ask you something? He said, as they moved to the next snare. Sure. Why are you helping us? Really? Alara was quiet for a moment, checking the snare. Another miss. You know what the hardest part of survival is? Hunger? No. Isolation. Being alone with nothing but your thoughts and the certainty that nobody cares if you live or die. She reset the snare with practiced efficiency. I've been alone since my parents died. 3 years working for someone who saw me as livestock. Then 2 months up here with nothing but stone and fire and my own voice echoing back at me. So we're, company? You're proof I'm still human. Alara stood and brushed dirt from her hands. I feed you. You stay alive. I know I haven't turned into something that only cares about personal survival. It's selfish, really. I'm saving myself as much as I'm saving you. Thomas absorbed that. Mama says nobody does anything without wanting something. Your mama's been hurt by people who took without giving back. Makes sense she'd think that way. Alara started walking again. But she's wrong. Some people give because they remember what it felt like to need. They checked 3 more snares, all empty, before heading back. On the return, Thomas slipped on icy rock and would have fallen if Alara hadn't caught his arm. Careful. Broken ankle up here means death. Death seems close all the time now. Alara looked at the boy, 8 years old, and talking about death like it was weather. Yeah, it is, but that's not new. Death's always been close. Most people just get to pretend it isn't. Do you pretend? No, pretending costs energy I need for staying alive. They reached the cave to find Sarah had rebuilt the fire and started a pot of water boiling. She looked up as they entered, her eyes immediately checking Thomas for injury. We're fine, Alara said before Sarah could ask. Nothing in the snares yet, but I showed him how to set them. He's 8. Old enough to learn, too young to be useless. Alara shrugged out of her outer dress. What's the water for? I thought, if you have extra fabric, I could try to make better insulation. For the cave entrance, keep more heat in. Sarah's voice was careful, like she was testing boundaries. If that's allowed, Alara considered. Good idea. I have a deer hide that's half tanned. Hasn't been useful yet, but might work for this. It's in the corner, wrapped in the burlap. I saw it. Sarah paused. Should I have asked before looking? Probably, but you didn't take it, so we're fine. Alara moved to retrieve the hide. You know how to work leather? A little. My grandmother was a seamstress. She taught me basic stitching before she died. Good, because I don't know anything about it. Alara handed over the hide. Make it work and we're warmer. Fail and we're out of hide. Your risk to take. Sarah took the leather, her hands running over it with an evaluating touch. I'll need something to cut with, and cord for stitching. Knife's there. Cord, Alara thought. I have sinew from the last deer. It's stiff, but it'll work. They spent the afternoon in surprising harmony. Sarah worked the hide, cutting and stitching with slow precision, while Ilara processed the rendered fat and Thomas organized the firewood by size. No one spoke much, but the silence felt productive rather than hostile. As evening approached and the temperature dropped, Sarah finished the first panel, a rough hide curtain that could be hung across the cave entrance to trap heat. "It's not pretty," she said, holding it up. Ilara examined it. The stitching was uneven and the edges ragged, but it was solid. "Pretty doesn't keep us warm. Functional does. Hang it." Together they rigged the curtain across the entrance using rope and a crossbeam Thomas had found. When it was in place, the difference was immediate. The wind that had knifed through the cave all winter cut to a whisper, and the fire's heat stopped escaping into the void. Sarah stepped back, looking at her work with something like pride. It actually worked. "You doubted it?" "I doubt everything now." Sarah's voice was soft. "But, yeah, it worked." That night, for the first time since they'd arrived, the cave felt less like a shelter and more like a home. They ate roasted root vegetables and the last of the squirrel meat, and Thomas fell asleep with his head on his mother's lap, the firelight painting shadows on the limestone walls. Sarah watched her son sleep, her hand stroking his hair with absent tenderness. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ilara looked up from the journal she'd been reading. "For what?" "For not making me beg. For treating us like equals instead of charity cases. For," Sarah's voice caught, "for letting us stay. You're earning your keep. No thanks needed." "Still." Sarah met her eyes across the fire. "You're strange, Ilara Vance, but you're not cruel. And after the past 6 months, that's everything." Ilara closed the journal. "Your husband, the one with the fists. If he shows up here, what happens?" Sarah's expression hardened. "I handle it." "How?" "However I have to." "That's not a plan. That's hope." Ilara leaned forward. "Hope gets people killed. I need to know, if he comes, are you going to fight or freeze?" "I don't know." "Figure it out. Because I mean what I said. Your battles are yours. I won't risk what I've built for your past." Sarah's jaw clenched. "You're a hard girl. I'm a live girl. There's a difference." Ilara stood and moved to check the fire. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we're setting more snares and you're learning to forage. Winter's only halfway done and we're already low on supplies. We need to triple our intake if all 3 of us are going to make it." "Triple? That's impossible." "Then we die. Those are the options." Ilara's voice was flat, factual. "So we make it possible." Sarah stared at her, and in the firelight, Ilara looked both ancient and impossibly young, a girl who'd aged into something else entirely, something that understood the brutal mathematics of survival without flinching. "I'll try," Sarah whispered. "Don't try. Do. Try means you've already accepted failure as an option." Ilara lay down near the fire, wrapped in her blanket, and closed her eyes. The conversation was over. Sarah sat awake for a long time, watching the strange girl who'd saved them and now drove them with the relentless focus of someone who'd forgotten how to be gentle. Thomas stirred in his sleep, and Sarah pulled him closer. Tomorrow she'd learn to forage. Tomorrow she'd prove she could pull her weight. Tomorrow she'd show this child queen that she was more than a burden. Tomorrow. But tonight, in the warmth of a cave that smelled like wood smoke and rendered fat and the mineral breath of ancient stone, Sarah Winters let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe they'd actually survived this. 3 days later, August Hale arrived. Ilara was outside checking snares when she saw him climbing the trail, moving with the steady pace of someone who knew these mountains. She froze, her mind racing through possibilities. Sarah and Thomas were inside the cave. If August asked questions, if he realized she was harboring 2 more people, she intercepted him 50 yards from the cave entrance. "Mr. Hale," he stopped, slightly winded from the climb, and studied her with those sharp old eyes. "Ilara, you look better. Put on weight." "Yes, sir. The snares are working." "Good. Brought you some—" He paused, his gaze shifting past her toward the cave. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You got company?" Ilara's heart hammered, but her voice stayed level. "Why do you ask?" "Do. Smoke pattern's different. You're burning more wood than usual, and there's—" He gestured vaguely. Movement, sound. The mountain feels occupied in a way it didn't before. She'd underestimated him. Of course she had. August Hale had survived the railroad camps and 30 years of Appalachian winters. He read landscapes like other people read newspapers. There's two of them, Ilara said. A mother and her son. They were dying. I brought them here. August's face remained neutral. When? 4 days ago. They staying? Through winter. If we can manage it. Can you? I don't know yet. Ilara met his eyes. Are you going to tell someone? Who would I tell? And why? August shifted the pack on his shoulders. Question is whether you can feed 3 mouths on what you've got. That's a lot of pressure for a 16-year-old. 17 in 2 months. Still, he studied her. These people, they running from something? Yes. Something that'll come looking? Possibly. The woman's husband. He hurt them. She left. August nodded slowly. And if he shows up here? She handles it. Not my problem. Everything in your cave becomes your problem eventually. His voice was gentle but firm. You took them in. You're responsible. Whether you like it or not. No. I gave them shelter and taught them to survive. What they do with that is on them. You keep telling yourself that. But when trouble comes, and it will come, you'll find out real quick that boundaries don't mean much when fists start flying. August started walking again toward the cave. Let's meet these people you're not responsible for. Ilara's stomach dropped, but she followed. There was no point in trying to stop him. At the cave entrance, August pulled back the hide curtain and stepped inside. Sarah and Thomas were by the fire. Sarah working on a second hide panel, Thomas sorting through pine cones for the seeds inside. They both froze when August entered. Well now, August's voice was mild. This is cozy. Sarah stood slowly, positioning herself between Thomas and the stranger. Her hand drifted toward the knife on the limestone shelf. Easy, Ilara said, moving past August into the cave. This is August Hale. He's the one who gave me my first supplies. She hesitated over the word. He's safe. That your assessment or your hope? Sarah's eyes never left August. Fact. If he wanted to hurt us, he could have done it already. Ilara moved to the fire. Mr. Hale, this is Sarah Winters and her son Thomas. They're staying through winter. August set his pack down and eased himself onto a rock near the fire. His movements were slow, deliberately non-threatening. Ma'am, son, I'm not here to cause problems, just checking on my investment. Investment? Sarah's voice was sharp. Ilara gave her tools and knowledge. Like to see it's being put to good use. He looked around the cave, taking in the changes, the hide curtain, the organized supplies, the additional sleeping areas marked out with pine boughs. Looks like it is. We're managing, Sarah said. Better than managing from what I see. That curtain yours? Yes. Good work. Stitching's rough but functional. You know leather work? Learning. August nodded approval. Practical. Ilara, you teaching them foraging? Started yesterday. Good. They need to pull weight if they're staying. He turned back to Sarah. No offense meant, ma'am, but 3 people on 1 person's supplies is a recipe for starvation. You contributing? Sarah's jaw clenched. I'm working. Every day. Didn't ask if you're working, asked if you're contributing. There's a difference. August's voice was kind but relentless. Working means you're busy. Contributing means you're adding value. So which is it? I made the curtain. I've been helping with food prep. That's working. Contributing would be bringing in new food sources, expanding capacity, making the group stronger than it was before you arrived. August leaned back. You done any of that? Sarah's face flushed. I've been here 4 days. And in 4 days, you've consumed resources. That's fine. That's human. But at some point, you need to produce more than you consume or you're just a slow drain. He looked at Ilara. You calculating the math? Every day. And? We're losing, slowly, but consistently. Sarah whirled on Ilara. You didn't say, you didn't ask. Ilara's voice was flat. I told you we needed to triple our intake. That's not a goal, it's a requirement. We're currently at about 1.5 times baseline, which means in 3 weeks we're out of reserves. 3 weeks. Sarah grabbed Thomas and pulled him close. You're saying we have 3 weeks before Before we're eating pine bark and hoping the snares finally pay off consistently, Alara met her eyes without flinching. This is why I push. This is why I'm hard. Because kindness without results gets us all killed. August watched the exchange with the attention of a man evaluating a complex mechanism. Sarah, you got skills beyond stitching? I can cook, clean. I worked in a boarding house before I married. Cooking and cleaning are maintenance. You know preservation, fermentation, smoking meat, making something last beyond its natural life? Sarah shook her head slowly. Then you learn, starting now. August opened his pack and pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Brought salt. More than I meant to, but seems like you need it. Also brought this. He produced a small earthenware crock. Starter for fermentation. You learn to use it, you can preserve vegetables through winter. Cabbage, turnips, whatever you find. He set the crock down carefully. But here's the price. You don't just use it. You master it. You experiment. You fail and try again until you can teach someone else. Knowledge is the only currency that matters up here, and I'm investing mine in you. Don't waste it. Sarah took the crock with trembling hands. Why? Because Alara's trying to build something. Don't know what yet, but I recognize the pattern, and she can't do it alone. August stood, his knees cracking. You got anger in you, Sarah Winters. I can see it. Anger at your husband, at the world, at being dependent on a teenage girl. That's fine. Use it. Channel it into productivity. But don't let it poison what's being built here. He turned to Alara. And you. Stop pretending you're not responsible for them. You are. The moment you gave them food, you took that on. Own it. Own it. His voice was iron. You can't build a community by keeping everyone at arm's length. At some point, you have to trust. To connect. To be more than a survival machine. He moved toward the entrance. I'll be back in a week. By then, I expect to see progress. More snares. Evidence of fermentation, and he looked directly at Sarah. Evidence that you're contributing, not just existing. He disappeared through the hide curtain, and the cave fell silent except for the crackle of fire. Thomas spoke first, his voice small. Mama, what's fermentation? Sarah looked at the crock in her hands, then at Alara. I don't know, baby, but we're going to learn. Alara opened the journal and flipped to her mother's notes on preservation. It's controlled rot, using good bacteria to preserve food while making it more nutritious. My mother did it with cabbage and beets. I haven't tried it yet because I haven't had the supplies. But now we do. Now we do. Alara set the journal down. So we experiment. Sarah sat slowly, still holding the crock like it might explode. He's right, isn't he, about me draining resources? Currently, yes, but that can change. How? You tell me. What can you do that I can't? What value do you bring beyond stitching hide? Sarah was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was raw. I know people. I can read them. Figure out what they need, what they're hiding. I worked a boarding house for 5 years. Dealt with drifters and salesmen and men looking for things I wasn't selling. I learned to see through lies, to anticipate trouble. Alara leaned forward. That's not nothing. That's actually useful. How? Because I don't know people. I know systems, patterns. But reading individuals, Alara shook her head. I'm blind there. If someone comes to this cave lying about their intentions, I might not catch it. You would. Something shifted in Sarah's expression. Not quite hope, but close to it. You're saying I could, what, guard against outsiders? I'm saying you could be the front line, the one who evaluates whether someone's trustworthy before they get close to our supplies. Alara paused. But that requires you to commit, to decide you're part of this instead of just passing through. And if my husband shows up, if he finds us, then you handle it. Like I said, but if you're committed, truly committed, I'll make sure you have the tools to handle it. Weapons, training, whatever you need to end the threat permanently. The word permanently hung in the air like a blade. Thomas pressed closer to his mother. Mama, are we staying? Sarah looked around the cave, at the fire, the supplies, the journal filled with knowledge, the strange teenage girl who'd somehow become the most competent person Sarah had met in years. Yeah, baby, she said finally. I think we are. Alara nodded once. Good. Then tomorrow we start fermentation experiments and triple the number of snares. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. That night, as the fire burned low and Sarah and Thomas slept, Alara lay awake staring at the cave ceiling. August's words echoed in her mind. You can't build a community by keeping everyone at arm's length. But community meant vulnerability, meant caring whether people lived or died, meant taking on their problems as her own. She'd been alone so long, isolation had become armor. Now 2 people slept in her cave, depending on her knowledge, her planning, her leadership. And somewhere down the mountain, a violent man might be looking for his escaped wife and son. Alara's hands clenched into fists. She'd said she wouldn't fight Sarah's battles, but if trouble came to this cave, to this fragile thing she was building, she'd do what was necessary, whatever that meant. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work so intense it left no room for thought. Alara drove them relentlessly, checking snares at dawn, foraging until midday, processing food and experimenting with fermentation until dark. Sarah and Thomas struggled to keep pace, but gradually they adapted. Sarah proved surprisingly adept at fermentation. Her boarding house experience translated to understanding timing and salt ratios, and within 5 days, she'd produced a crock of preserved turnips that smelled vile but tasted edible. It's working, she said with genuine wonder, holding up a fermented turnip slice to the firelight. It's surviving, Alara corrected. Working would be if it's still good in a month. But even she had to admit the progress was real. The supply situation had stabilized. They were no longer losing ground, though they weren't gaining much either. The snares began producing more consistently. Thomas had a knack for reading animal behavior, and the snares he set caught twice as often as anyone else's. He couldn't explain how he chose the locations, just said they felt right. But the results spoke for themselves. They were surviving. But survival wasn't growth. On the 14th day after August's visit, Alara made a decision. We're going down the mountain. Sarah looked up from the hide she was working. What? Down. To the valley. There's a salt lick August mentioned, and wild onions in the south-facing slopes. Maybe early greens if we're lucky. Alara was already packing her bag. We take everything we can carry and process it up here. That's a full day's journey, both ways. Yes. And you want all 3 of us to go? Leave the cave unattended? No, you and I go. Thomas stays and tends the fire. Absolutely not. Sarah stood, her voice sharp. He's 8. I'm not leaving him alone. He's capable. And we need the carrying capacity. 2 people can haul twice what 1 can. Alara met Sarah's eyes. He'll be fine. The cave is secure. The fire is stable. And he knows to stay inside. No, I'm not. Mama. Thomas's voice cut through her protest. I can do it. Baby, you're too young. I tend the fire every day already. I know how to add wood, how to keep it from going out. His small face was serious. And if something happens, I know to hide in the back of the cave and stay quiet until you come back. Sarah looked between her son and Alara, panic evident in her eyes. This is insane. This is necessary. Alara's voice was gentle but firm. We're not gaining ground fast enough. We need more resources, and that means a major foraging trip. I can't do it alone. I'd have to make multiple trips, and that wastes time and energy. With both of us, we make 1 trip and haul enough to actually matter. And if something happens while we're gone, if he gets hurt or the fire goes out, then we deal with it when we return. But the alternative is watching our supplies dwindle until we're all starving. Is that better? Sarah's hands shook. This was different from fermentation or setting snares. This was trusting her child's life to a plan made by someone else, giving up control. How long? She whispered. We leave at first light. If we move fast, we're back by nightfall. 12 hours. Maybe 14 if we're thorough. 14 hours? He'll be alone for 14 hours. He'll be fine. You don't know that. No. Alara's voice softened slightly. But I know the odds. And I know that risk calculated is better than risk avoided until it kills you. Sarah closed her eyes, breathed, opened them. If anything happens to him, then you kill me. Fair? Don't joke. I'm not joking. If my plan gets your son hurt, you have every right to end me. But I'm betting it won't. I'm betting he's tougher than you think. Alara looked at Thomas. What do you think? Can you handle it? The boy nodded slowly. I can, Mama. I promise. Sarah stared at her son, at the determination in his eyes that she'd never seen before, and realized with a sharp pang that the past weeks had changed him. He was still a child, but he was also becoming something else, someone who understood that survival required courage, not just caution. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay. But we're back before dark, not 1 minute after." "Agreed." Alara continued packing. "Thomas, tomorrow you're in charge of the fire and the cave. No going outside except to check the nearest snare. If you catch anything, dress it and store it in the cool corner. If anything goes wrong, and I mean anything, you hide in the back and wait. Understood?" "Yes." They spent the rest of the day preparing, showing Thomas where everything was, rehearsing emergency procedures, making sure he knew exactly what to do in every scenario they could imagine. That night, Sarah held Thomas close and whispered prayers she'd stopped believing in months ago. Alara watched from across the fire and said nothing. At first light, they left. Thomas stood at the cave entrance, looking smaller than usual against the stone, and watched them descend the trail. When Alara looked back one last time, he waved, a small, brave gesture that made her chest tighten with something she didn't want to name. Then they were gone, swallowed by pine forest and morning mist. The journey down took 3 hours of hard hiking. Sarah struggled with the pace. She'd gained some strength, but weeks of semi-starvation had left her weaker than she'd ever been. Alara had to stop twice to let her rest. "I'm slowing us down," Sarah panted. "Yes, but you're also here. That's what matters." They found the Salt Lick first, a mineral-rich outcrop where deer had worn the stone smooth. Alara showed Sarah how to scrape salt into their bags, the crystals mixing with dirt and small stones that would need to be filtered out later. "This is gold," Alara said. "We can preserve meat indefinitely with this. Make winter storage actually work." They filled 2 bags before moving on to the south-facing slopes. Here, protected from the worst of winter's bite, they found what they'd hoped for: wild onions, their green shoots pushing through leaf litter. Some winter cress, even a few chickweed plants, tender and edible. They harvested everything, working with the focused intensity of people who understood that missing a single plant could mean the difference between full and hungry tomorrow. By midday, their bags were heavy and their hands raw from scraping and digging. Sarah's face was gray with exhaustion, but she didn't complain. "There's a creek nearby," Alara said. "We refill water, rest 15 minutes, then head back." They found the creek and drank deeply, the cold water tasting like iron and earth. As they rested, Sarah spoke. "Thank you." Alara looked up. "For what?" "For trusting Thomas. For—" Sarah struggled with the words. "For seeing him as capable instead of fragile. His father never did, just saw him as something to be protected or ignored. He's stronger than you think. I'm starting to see that." Sarah looked at her cracked hands. "I'm starting to see a lot of things differently." They rested in companionable silence and then began the long climb back. Halfway up the mountain, as the sun angled toward evening and shadows grew long between the pines, they heard it. A gunshot. Single. Sharp. Echoing through the ridges so it was impossible to tell direction. Sarah's face went white. "Thomas!" She was running before Alara could stop her, crashing through underbrush with the desperate speed of a mother whose child might be dying. Alara followed, her own heart hammering, their heavy bags forgotten in the panic. They reached the cave in 20 minutes, a climb that should have taken an hour, and burst through the hide curtain prepared for blood, fire, disaster. Instead, they found Thomas sitting calmly by the fire, alive and unharmed, stirring a pot of soup. And sitting across from him, hands tied behind his back and blood seeping from a wound in his thigh, was a man Alara had never seen before. A man whose face Sarah recognized immediately. "Hello, wife," he said, his voice thick with pain and rage. "Been looking for you." Sarah froze in the entrance, and the color drained from her face as she stared at the man who'd haunted her nightmares for 6 months. Her husband had found them, and somehow, impossibly, her 8-year-old son had shot. The blood spreading across the cave floor was dark, almost black in the firelight. It pooled beneath the man's leg where the makeshift tourniquet, torn from what looked like Thomas's shirt, had slowed but not stopped the bleeding. Sarah stood frozen in the entrance, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, that sounded like someone drowning on dry land. The man, her husband, smiled through the pain. His teeth were stained red where he'd bitten his tongue, and his face was gray beneath dirt and several days of stubble. Cat got your tongue, Sarah? That's new. You never could shut up before. Alara's eyes went to Thomas. The boy sat perfectly still beside the fire, his small hands resting on his knees. The rifle, August's rifle, the one he'd left 3 days ago wrapped in oilcloth and hidden in the back of the cave, lay on the ground near his feet. What happened? Alara said. Not a question, a command. Thomas's voice was steady, almost eerily calm. He came looking, started calling for Mama outside the cave. I stayed quiet like you said, but then he came inside. So you shot him. He was reaching for me. I thought... The boy's voice finally cracked. I thought he was going to hurt me. Damn right I was going to grab you, the man spat. Blood flecked his lips. You're my son, my property, just like your mother. Sarah made a sound, low and wounded, like an animal caught in a trap. Alara dropped her bag and moved to the man, crouching just out of his reach. Her eyes scanned the wound clinically. The bullet had gone through the meat of his thigh, missing the artery but causing significant damage. He'd live if they treated it, die if they didn't. She stood and looked at Sarah. Do you want him to live? The question hung in the air like smoke. Thomas's eyes went wide and the man's smile died. What? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Simple question. He's bleeding. I can stop it, or I can let it continue. Your choice. You little bitch! The man tried to lunge forward, but his bound hands and wounded leg made the movement pathetic. He collapsed back with a cry of pain. Alara didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed on Sarah. Decide. We're burning daylight. Sarah's mouth opened and closed. Her hand shook. I don't... Yes or no, Sarah, does he live or die? Jesus Christ, you can't just... He's a human being. So are you. So is Thomas. And from what I understand, this human being locked you in a barn and beat you when you didn't comply. Alara's voice was flat, clinical. So I'm asking, is his life worth preserving, or is it a threat we eliminate? The man's face twisted with rage and fear. Sarah, baby, you can't let this crazy girl... We're married. You can't... Don't call me baby. Sarah's voice came out strangled. Don't you dare. I'm your husband. You stopped being my husband when you put your fist through our bedroom wall because dinner was cold. I was drunk. I told you I was sorry. You were always sorry, always. Sarah took a step forward, and Alara saw something shift in her eyes, something hard and sharp that had been buried under months of fear. And then you'd do it again and again, until I was walking on eggshells every second, terrified that the wrong word or look would set you off. I loved you. You loved control. You loved having someone you could break when the world broke you. Sarah's voice was rising now, years of silence cracking open. You loved that I was afraid, that Thomas was afraid, that we flinched when you walked in the room. The man's face crumpled. I'm hurt. I'm bleeding. You're going to let me die over mistakes? Mistakes? Sarah laughed, a horrible, jagged sound. You call breaking my ribs a mistake? Choking me until I passed out a mistake? Telling our son he was worthless, stupid, better off never being born? That's a mistake? Sarah, no. No, you don't get to do that anymore. You don't get to make excuses and watch me swallow them because I'm too scared or too broken to fight back. She turned to Alara. How long does he have? If we don't treat it? Alara glanced at the wound. Hour, maybe 2. He'll go into shock first, then bleed out. It won't be quick. The man's eyes went wide with panic. Sarah, please. I'm begging you. I'll leave. I'll never bother you again. I swear to God. You swore to God you'd love and cherish me. Look how that turned out. Sarah's voice had gone quiet again, but it carried a weight that made the air in the cave feel heavy. Thomas, go to the back of the cave. Don't look. Mama, now. The boy scrambled up and disappeared into the shadows, and Alara heard the soft sound of him pressing himself against the far wall. Sarah walked slowly toward her husband. He tracked her movement like a cornered animal, and when she knelt beside him, he flinched. You're afraid of me, Sarah said wonderingly. After everything. After years of you making me afraid. Now you're the one who's scared. Please. She slapped him, hard. The crack echoed through the cave and the man's head snapped to the side. When he turned back, his eyes were wet with tears. That's for Thomas. For every time you told him he wasn't good enough. She slapped him again, backhanded this time. That's for me. For every bruise, every broken promise, every night I cried myself to sleep. Sarah, I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're just afraid. She stood and looked at Alara. Can you save him? Probably. The wound's not fatal if we treat it properly. Clean it, pack it, keep infection out. Alara paused. But he'll need weeks to recover. Can't walk on that leg. Can barely move. He'd be here, in this cave, consuming resources, needing care. Could we take him somewhere else? Drop him near town? Not without killing him. Moving him down the mountain would restart the bleeding. He'd die before we got halfway. Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were dry. Then we treat him. We keep him alive. The man sagged with relief. Thank you. Oh God, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Sarah's voice was ice. You're alive because Thomas doesn't need to grow up knowing he killed his father. Not because you deserve it. And while you're here, you follow our rules. You speak when spoken to. You stay where you're put. You touch nothing and no one without permission. She leaned down until her face was inches from his. And if you raise your voice, if you threaten, if you so much as look at my son wrong, I'll finish what he started. Understood? The man nodded frantically. Alara moved to her supplies and began pulling out what they'd need. This is going to hurt. Good, Sarah said. They worked through the night. Alara cleaned the wound with whiskey August had brought weeks ago, the alcohol burning through damaged tissue while the man screamed into a strip of leather they'd shoved in his mouth. Sarah held him down with a strength born of rage while Alara worked, her hands steady despite the gore. When the wound was clean, they packed it with cloth boiled in salt water and bound it tight. The man had passed out halfway through, which made the rest easier. Thomas stayed in the back of the cave, and when Alara finally told him he could come out, his face was streaked with tears. I didn't mean to shoot him. I really didn't. He grabbed for me and the gun was there and You protected yourself. Sarah pulled her son close. You did exactly what you should have done. But he's hurt and bleeding, and it's my fault. No. Sarah's voice was firm. It's his fault for coming here, for scaring you, for being the kind of man a child has to shoot to feel safe. She kissed the top of Thomas's head. You're not responsible for his choices, only your own. And your choice was to survive. Alara cleaned the blood from her hands in a bucket of melted snow. Her mind was already calculating the new reality. Another mouth to feed, a wounded man who couldn't contribute. Supplies that were already stretched thin now stretched impossibly thinner. And something else. Something that nagged at the edge of her awareness. Sarah, how did he find you? Sarah looked up from where she was holding Thomas. What? Your husband. How did he find this cave? Nobody knows we're here except August, and he wouldn't tell. I don't know. Maybe he followed our tracks? From where? You've been here for weeks. Your tracks are long gone. Alara moved to where the unconscious man lay and began searching his pockets. There has to be. She found it in his coat. A piece of paper, folded and dirty. She opened it slowly. The handwriting was neat, precise, unmistakably feminine. The Winters woman and her boy are in a cave on the north ridge above Tolliver property. The girl who's hiding them is Alara Vance, Jacob's daughter. They have supplies. Take what you want. Below the message was a simple map. Directions from town to the cave, marked with small X's at landmarks. Alara's hands went numb. She knew that handwriting, had seen it 100 times on household lists and shopping inventories and notes left for servants. Constance Tolliver. What is it? Sarah was standing now, moving toward Alara. What did you find? Alara handed her the paper without a word. Sarah read it once, twice. Her face went pale. Who's Constance Tolliver? Marcus Tolliver's wife, the man who threw me out. Alara's voice sounded distant to her own ears. She was there that morning. She She let me keep my mother's jars. I thought she stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence because finishing it meant admitting how stupid she'd been, how naive, how desperately she'd wanted to believe that one small kindness meant anything at all. She sent him here. Sarah's voice was hollow. She told your location to my husband. Why? What does she gain? I don't know. But that was a lie. Alara knew exactly what Constance Tolliver gained. The satisfaction of destroying someone who dared to survive being thrown away. The comfort of knowing that the girl who'd made her feel guilty, even for a moment, was suffering, cruelty for cruelty's sake. The man groaned and his eyes fluttered open. He focused on Alara with effort. Water. She stood and walked to him slowly, knelt, put her face close to his. Who told you about us? His eyes slid away. Don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Someone gave you directions. A woman. Who was she? Just a lady in town. Saw me asking around about Sarah. Said she knew where... He coughed, winced. Said she knew where my wife ran off to. Drew me a map. What did she look like? Old, fancy, rich from her clothes. Had this way of talking like she was better than everyone. He managed a weak smile. Reminded me of Sarah's mother, actually. All ice and judgment. Sarah made a small sound, but Alara ignored her. What did she want in return? Want? Nothing. Just said... He paused, his brow furrowing with the effort of memory. Said it would be justice. Something about debts and children paying for their parents' mistakes. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. Debts. Her parents' debts. 8 years of labor that had killed them both and still not been enough. Marcus Tolliver had thrown her out claiming the debt was unpaid. But what if it wasn't about money? What if it was about something else entirely? Some slight or insult or perceived wrong that festered for years. Did she say anything else? The man's eyes were drooping. Said to take what I wanted. Said the girl up there, you, had stolen supplies that belonged to them. That you were a thief and... He coughed again, harder. That you deserved whatever came to you. Alara stood slowly. Her hands were shaking, and she didn't know if it was rage or fear or something else entirely. Sarah was reading the note again, her face twisted with confusion. Alara, this doesn't make sense. If she wanted you caught, why not just send the law? Why send my husband? Because the law would ask questions. Your husband wouldn't. He'd come up here angry and violent and... Alara stopped. She knew what he was. She knew what he'd do. She wanted him to kill you. The words hung in the air. Thomas, listening from the shadows, made a small whimpering sound. Not kill. Hurt. Destroy. Alara's voice was flat. Dead. I'm a tragedy. Beaten, raped, driven off. I'm a lesson. Proof that trying to rise above your station ends in suffering. Sarah's face had gone from pale to flushed, anger replacing shock. This woman, she lives in town? Yes. Big house, the Tolliver estate. Then we go there. We confront her. We do nothing. Alara's voice cracked like a whip. We stay here. We survive. We don't give her the satisfaction of seeing us react. She tried to have you killed, and she failed, because your husband is an idiot who telegraphed his approach and got shot by an 8-year-old. That's her failure, not mine. Alara moved to the fire and fed it with shaking hands. Going to her house, making a scene, that's what she wants. Proof that we're unstable, dangerous, justification for whatever comes next. So we just, what, pretend this didn't happen? No. We remember. We plan. And when the time is right, we make sure she understands exactly what kind of mistake she made. Alara's eyes were hard. But not now. Not when we're weak and she's protected and all we have is rage. Sarah stared at her. You're serious. You want to wait. I want to win. Winning requires patience. She sent a violent man to this cave. To my son. To us. And you want to be patient? Yes. Alara turned to face her fully. Because rushing and angry gets us killed or arrested, and I refuse to give her either satisfaction. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackle of fire and the wounded man's labored breathing. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice low and dangerous. You're not who I thought you were. What? You act like you're this rational survivor, all logic and efficiency, but really you're just cold. You'd let anything happen, tolerate any insult, as long as it doesn't threaten your precious system. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. That woman tried to destroy you, and all you care about is whether responding would be strategically sound. That's not... Yes, it is. You're so afraid of losing control that you won't fight back when someone literally tries to have you killed. What kind of life is that? What kind of existence? A living one. Elara's voice went quiet. You want to know what happens if we go to town? If we accuse Constance Tolliver of conspiracy to murder, she denies it. Shows them this note. Oh, wait. We took it, so there's no evidence. It's our word against hers, and she's wealthy and respected, and we're squatters in a cave. Then we make her pay another way. How? Burn her house? Kill her? Great plan. And when they hang us for it, who takes care of Thomas? Elara's voice was rising despite her best efforts. You want revenge? Fine. I want it too. But I want it smart. I want it permanent, and that requires time. Time for what? To build something she can't tear down. To become someone she can't dismiss. Elara gestured at the cave. Right now, we're nothing. 3 people in a hole surviving on scraps. She could crush us like insects and nobody would care. But if we grow, if we become something that matters to people, then we're protected. Then we're dangerous. Sarah shook her head slowly. You're insane. You think you can outgrow Marcus Tolliver? He owns half the county. He owns land. That's not the same as owning people. Elara's eyes burned. Knowledge is power. Community is power. And right now, he has neither. Just money and a big house and a wife who's so bored she entertains herself by trying to murder teenage girls. Knowledge, Sarah laughed bitterly. You sound like your father's journal. All these grand ideas about building systems and communities, but you can't even admit when you're hurt, when someone's wronged you. I can admit it just fine. I'm hurt. I'm angry. I want Constance Tolliver to suffer. Elara's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But I want her to suffer, knowing she caused her own destruction. That her cruelty created the thing that ended her. That's better than any quick revenge. Sarah stared at her for a long moment. Then, you scare me sometimes. Good. Maybe that'll keep you from doing something stupid that gets us all killed. The wounded man chose that moment to groan again, drawing their attention. His face was gray and sweating, and his breathing had become shallow. Elara moved to check his bandages. Blood had seeped through, but not enough to be immediately dangerous. He'll need water and broth. Small amounts. And the bandage changed every 6 hours. I'm not nursing him, Sarah said flatly. Neither am I. He can do it himself or he can rot. Elara straightened. But he stays alive until he can travel. Then we send him down the mountain with a message. What message? That we know what Constance did, that we have the note, and that if anything else happens to us, anything suspicious at all, copies of that note go to everyone in the county. Elara met Sarah's eyes. Insurance, the best kind. Sarah absorbed this. You already planned this before I even suggested going to town. I started planning the second I read the note. While I was panicking and ready to burn everything down, you were strategizing. Someone has to think clearly. Sarah's expression was unreadable. I don't know if that makes you brilliant or broken. Probably both. Elara moved back to the fire. Thomas, come here. The boy emerged from the shadows, his face still tear-streaked. Elara knelt to his level. You did nothing wrong. You understand me? Nothing. But I shot him. You defended yourself against a threat. That's not wrong. That's survival. She gripped his small shoulders. And you're going to feel bad about it anyway, because you're a good person. But feeling bad doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes the right thing and the thing that feels good are different. You need to learn to live with that. Thomas nodded, not really understanding, but trusting her anyway. Elara stood and addressed them both. New reality. We have a wounded man who can't contribute and will drain resources for weeks. We have confirmed enemies in town who want us destroyed. And we have supplies that won't last if we don't triple our intake like I've been saying. She paused. So here's what happens next. We work harder, we complain less, we become ruthlessly efficient, because the alternative is losing everything. Sarah's jaw tightened. You really think we can win against people like the Tollivers? I think we can survive, and survival is the first step to winning. Alara looked at the cave around them, the fire, the supplies, the wounded man bleeding on the floor. This cave is ours. This mountain is ours. And if they want to take it from us, they're going to find out exactly how expensive that fight will be. The next 3 days were hell. The man, his name was Robert, though nobody called him that, developed a fever. His wound, despite their careful cleaning, had started to fester. Alara recognized the signs of infection and knew they had limited options. She heated the knife in the fire until it glowed red. "Hold him down," she told Sarah. Robert's eyes went wide when he saw the blade. "No, no, please. The infection's spreading. I burn it out or you die. Choose." "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Alara's voice was flat. "Sarah, hold him." Sarah hesitated only a moment before moving to pin her husband's shoulders. Thomas she sent to the back of the cave again, but the boy's screams as Alara pressed the burning blade into infected flesh echoed through the stone chamber anyway. When it was done, Robert had passed out from the pain and Sarah was crying silently. "That was barbaric," she whispered. "That was necessary." Alara cleaned the blade. "He'll live now, probably, but he'll have a scar that reminds him what happens when you threaten people in this cave." "You enjoyed that." Alara paused. Had she? The screaming hadn't bothered her. The smell of burning flesh had been unpleasant, but not unbearable. And yes, there had been a small, dark satisfaction in watching the man who'd hurt Sarah suffer the consequences of his own choices. "Maybe," she said finally. "Does that make me a monster?" "I don't know anymore. I genuinely don't know." That night, while Robert slept fitfully and Sarah tended the fire, Alara sat with the journal open on her lap. She hadn't written in it since her parents died, hadn't wanted to add her own words to theirs. But now she picked up the pencil August had brought and began to write. March 3rd, 1935. Learned today that kindness is a weapon. Constance Tolliver showed me mercy once. Let me keep my mother's jars. I thought it meant something. Instead, it was strategy. Let me hope, then destroy that hope. More effective than simple cruelty. Note to self, never confuse tactical kindness for genuine care. People are either useful, neutral, or threats. Constance Tolliver is a threat. Treat her accordingly. She paused, then added, "Sarah thinks I'm cold." Maybe she's right. But cold keeps you alive when warmth gets you killed. Father used to say emotion clouds judgment. Mother said emotion makes us human. They were both right and both wrong. The trick is knowing when to feel and when to freeze. Still learning. She closed the journal and looked around the cave. Thomas asleep in the corner, his small face peaceful despite everything. Sarah staring into the fire, her expression haunted. Robert breathing raggedly, his future uncertain. And her. 17 in 2 weeks, running a cave like a military operation, treating wounds with heated knives, planning revenge on people who wanted her dead. When had she become this? The answer came immediately. The moment Marcus Tolliver threw her into the snow and told her she didn't exist. She'd decided then, shivering and alone, that she would prove him wrong, that she would build something that mattered. But somewhere between that decision and now, she'd stopped being the scared girl who just wanted to survive. She'd become something harder, something that looked at human suffering and calculated cost-benefit ratios, something that could burn a man's infected flesh without flinching. Monster or survivor? The line between them was thinner than she'd thought. August arrived on the 6th day after Robert's shooting. He took one look at the wounded man, at Sarah's haunted eyes, at Thomas's new wariness, and sat down heavily by the fire. "Tell me." Alara told him everything. The shooting, the note, Constance Tolliver's betrayal, her plan for patient revenge. When she finished, August was quiet for a long time. Finally, "You kept the note?" "Hidden, wrapped in oilcloth and buried outside the cave. Multiple copies." "Smart." He looked at Robert. "This him? The husband?" "Yes." And you treated him instead of letting him die. Also smart. Dead man brings lawmen. Injured man just brings gossip. August stood and examined Robert's wound. Infection's clearing. You did good work. I burned it out with a hot knife. I know. I can smell it. He glanced at her. That bother you? Should it? Most people don't take to field medicine that brutal. I'm not most people. August smiled slightly. No, you're not. He moved back to the fire. Constance Tolliver. You sure it's her handwriting? Completely. And you're planning to wait. Build strength before retaliating. Yes. He nodded slowly. Good strategy. But here's what you're not considering. While you're building, she's planning. Women like Constance don't stop at one attempt. She tried to have you hurt. It failed, so she'll try something else. Probably worse. Alara's stomach tightened. What do you suggest? 2 options. 1, you leave, pack up, go deeper into the mountains, start somewhere she can't find you. No. Didn't think so. 2, you accelerate. Don't build slow, build fast and loud. Make yourself visible. Make yourself matter to enough people that harming you becomes politically dangerous. How? August leaned back. You're feeding 3 people on scraps and skill. What if you were feeding 30? What if this cave became a place people came when they were desperate? What if you became the person who saves the starving? Sarah, who'd been listening silently, spoke up. That's insane. We can barely feed ourselves. Now, yes, but spring's coming. Game will return. Plants will grow. And people... August's eyes gleamed. People are starving out there. The depression's got its teeth in every family. Most folks are 1 bad month from destitution. You become the place they can turn to. You become untouchable. We don't have the resources. You have knowledge. You have a sustainable system starting to work. You have... He gestured at the cave. You have this. A place nobody else wanted, turned into something functional. That's powerful. That's a story people tell. Alara felt something shift in her mind. The plan she'd been forming, slow, patient, careful, suddenly seemed small, insufficient. But this was bigger. You're talking about building an institution, she said slowly. I'm talking about building a legacy, something that outlives you, something that proves Constance Tolliver and everyone like her that the people they throw away are the ones who change the world. Sarah was shaking her head. This is madness. We're 3 people, 4 if you count the invalid, in a cave. You're talking about feeding the valley. I'm talking about starting small and growing smart. August's voice was firm. Right now you're hiding. Hiding keeps you safe, but powerless. I'm suggesting you do the opposite. Become so visible, so essential, that destroying you becomes impossible. And if we fail, Sarah demanded, if we can't scale up, if people come, and we can't feed them, and they starve, then we fail trying to build something instead of succeeding at cowering in fear. August looked at Alara. Your choice. Safety or significance. Can't have both. Alara thought about the note, about Constance Tolliver's neat handwriting directing violence to this cave, about the assumption that a thrown-away girl would just disappear quietly. She thought about her parents, worked to death in service of a debt that was never really about money. She thought about Sarah and Thomas, running from a man who thought he owned them. And she thought about everyone else out there, the desperate, the discarded, the people the world had decided didn't matter. We build, she said, fast and loud. We become something they can't ignore. Sarah's face went pale. Alara, this is suicide. No, hiding and waiting for the next attack is suicide. This is choosing our own destruction over letting them choose it for us. Alara stood. If we're going down, we go down building something that proves we mattered, that we existed. You're going to get us killed. Maybe. But we'll die meaning something instead of nothing. Robert, who'd been silent until now, laughed weakly from his corner. You're all crazy. Building a charity kitchen in a cave with what resources, what staff, what... He coughed. What makes you think anyone would come? Alara turned to him slowly. Because you came. Because you walked up a mountain in winter following directions from a cruel woman hoping to reclaim something you'd lost. If desperation can drive you, it can drive others. I came to get my wife back. You came because you were powerless and grasping at control. Everyone out there feels the same way, powerless. We give them power, the power to feed themselves, to survive, to matter, and they'll come. She paused. And they'll protect what gave them that power. That's how you build something untouchable. Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, they held resignation. If we do this, if we actually try this insane plan, I need something from you. What? Honesty. Real honesty. No more calculating everything 3 moves ahead without telling me. No more treating me like a resource instead of a partner. Sarah's voice was hard. You want to build a community? Start by being part of one. That means trust. Means vulnerability. Means being something other than a survival machine. The words hit harder than Alara expected. She opened her mouth to argue, to explain why vulnerability was weakness, why trust was dangerous, but the look in Sarah's eyes stopped her. This was the cost. The price of building something bigger than herself. She had to become someone capable of connection, of trust, of being human in ways that terrified her. I'll try, she said finally. That's not good enough. It's all I have. Alara's voice cracked. I don't know how to be what you're asking. I've spent 3 years becoming something that can't be hurt, and now you want me to open up, to trust? I don't know if I can. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Sarah spoke, her voice softer. Then we learn together. Because I don't know how to stop being afraid, and you don't know how to start feeling. And somehow we have to figure it out, or this whole thing falls apart before it begins. August stood. I'll spread the word, quietly at first. Let people know there's a place up here. A girl who teaches survival. A community forming. He looked at Alara. You've got maybe 2 weeks before the first desperate soul shows up at your door. Use that time to prepare. Triple your supplies. Build sleeping areas. Figure out your system. 2 weeks isn't enough. It's what you have. Make it work. He moved toward the entrance. And Alara? That note. Keep it safe. You're going to need it. He left, and the cave fell silent, except for the fire and Robert's labored breathing. Sarah looked at Alara. We're really doing this. Yes. We're going to fail, you know that, right? We're going to try to build this thing, and it's going to collapse and probably kill us. Probably, Alara agreed. So why? Why risk everything? Alara thought about Constance Tolliver's note, about Marcus Tolliver's voice saying, you don't exist anymore, about her mother's journal entry. Some knowledge lives in the body, not the mind. Because existing isn't enough, she said finally. I want to matter. I want to build something that proves my parents didn't die for nothing, that their knowledge, their sacrifice, her voice broke, that it meant something. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then, okay, then we build. But when it falls apart, when people die or starve or this whole thing explodes, you don't get to pretend you didn't care. You don't get to hide behind logic and strategy. You feel it. You own it. Agreed? It was the hardest thing Alara had ever agreed to, but she nodded. Agreed. That night, as the others slept, Alara sat by the fire and tried to imagine what they were building. A kitchen in a cave that fed the desperate. A community of discarded people proving they mattered. A legacy that would outlive them all. It was impossible. Insane. Doomed to fail. But as the flames danced and the stone walls held back the winter cold, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope. And she realized with sudden clarity that Constance Tolliver's note hadn't destroyed her. It had freed her. Because now she knew exactly what she was up against. Now she could stop surviving and start. The first one came on a Tuesday. Alara was outside the cave checking snares when she saw the figure stumbling up the trail. A woman, maybe 30, thin enough that her bones showed through her dress. She moved like someone who'd forgotten how to walk properly, each step a negotiation between will and body. Alara watched from behind a pine tree, her hand on the knife at her belt. August had said 2 weeks. It had been 9 days. The woman stopped 50 feet from the cave entrance, swaying. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she collapsed. Alara was moving before conscious thought kicked in, crossing the distance in seconds. Up close, the woman was worse than she'd appeared. Her skin was gray, her breathing shallow, and when Alara touched her forehead, it burned with fever. "Sarah!" Alara's voice cracked through the morning air. "Get out here!" Sarah emerged from the cave, took one look, and ran back inside. She returned with Thomas and a blanket, and together they half carried, half dragged the unconscious woman into the cave. Robert, who'd been relegated to the corner and was healing slowly, watched with dull eyes. "Another mouth to feed." "Great." "Shut up." Sarah's voice was automatic, distracted. She was already examining the woman, checking for injuries. "Alara, she's burning up, and look, her feet." Alara looked. The woman's feet were black with frostbite, the flesh dead and rotting. The smell made her stomach turn. "We can't save those," Alara said flatly. "They're already gone. We have to try it. No, we cut them off or she dies of infection." Alara was already moving, gathering supplies. "Thomas, get the fire as hot as you can. Sarah, heat water. Lots of it. We're going to need to sterilize everything." "You can't just amputate someone's feet. Watch me." The woman woke up screaming when Alara started cutting. Sarah had to hold her down while Thomas hid in the back of the cave, hands over his ears. Robert watched with sick fascination. It took an hour. When it was done, the woman had passed out again, and Alara's hands were covered in blood up to the elbows. "She'll die anyway," Sarah whispered. "Shock, infection, blood loss." "Maybe, but we gave her a chance." Alara cleaned the knife. "That's more than she had before." The woman didn't die. Against all odds, she survived the night and woke the next morning lucid and in agony. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse. "Safe," Alara said. "For now." "My feet. I can't feel my feet." "They're gone. Frostbite. Had to remove them or you'd have died." Alara's voice was matter of fact. "You'll live, but you won't walk again, not without help." The woman stared at the ceiling, tears running down her temples. "Then I should have died. Too late now. You're alive and we spent resources saving you, so you're going to earn your keep." Alara moved to the fire. "What's your name?" "Grace?" "Grace Miller." "Well, Grace, welcome to the cave. As soon as you can sit up without passing out, you're going to learn fermentation. Sarah will teach you, and when your hands work properly again, you're going to help with food prep." Alara paused. "You complain, you leave. You work, you eat. Those are the rules." Grace laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Rules in a cave, run by a child. A child who still has her feet. So yeah, my cave, my rules." Alara turned back to her. "You came here for a reason. What was it?" "I heard someone in town said there was a girl on the mountain, a girl who knew how to survive, who helped people." Grace's voice cracked. "My husband died. Mill accident. No money. No food. I tried everything, but winter just kept taking. And someone told you where to find me. Old man. Worked the railroad once. Said you were building something. Said..." She paused. "Said if anyone could help, it was you." August. Spreading the word like he'd promised. "You're the first," Alara said. "Won't be the last. Can you handle that?" Grace looked at her ruined feet, at the cave around her, at the strange collection of people huddled around the fire. "Seems like I don't have much choice. Everyone has a choice. Yours is whether you want to live or give up." Alara moved to the entrance. "Think about it. Let me know." She walked out into the cold morning, her hands still stained with Grace's blood, and tried to calculate the new math. 4 people now. 5 if Robert ever became useful. Supplies that were already stretched thin now stretched thinner. They had maybe a week before the cave's ecosystem collapsed completely, unless they found more food, more resources, more everything. "We need to hunt," she said when she came back inside. "Real hunting. Deer. Maybe elk if we're lucky." Sarah looked up from where she was tending Grace. "We don't have guns, just August's rifle, and I don't know how to shoot it." "Then you learn. Today." Alara pulled the rifle from its hiding place. "Thomas can already shoot. He proved that. You're next." You've also never amputated feet, but we did that yesterday. Learning is the only currency we have." Alara checked the rifle. Still loaded, still functional. "Come on." They spent the afternoon on the slope below the cave, Sarah learning to sight down the barrel while Alara coached her through breathing and trigger pull. Thomas watched from a safe distance, his face still haunted by the memory of shooting his father. "Squeeze, don't pull," Alara instructed. "Pull jerks the barrel. Squeeze keeps it steady." Sarah fired. The shot went wide, splintering bark off a tree 20 feet from the target Alara had marked. Better. Again. They went through 15 rounds before Sarah managed to hit the target, a rough X carved into a dead pine. When the bark exploded where she'd aimed, Sarah lowered the rifle with shaking hands. "I did it. Once. Do it 10 more times, and you're competent. Do it 100, and you're good." Alara took the rifle. But it's a start. That night, Grace Miller sat up for the first time and ate thin broth without vomiting. Progress. Robert's wound had mostly healed, though he still couldn't put weight on the leg without wincing. Not progress, but not regression either. And outside, the temperature was starting to rise. Just slightly, just enough to suggest that spring was coming. Maybe they'd make it. Maybe. The second person arrived 3 days later. A man this time, middle-aged and desperate, with 2 children clinging to his coat. His wife had died in childbirth and he'd lost his farm to the bank, and he had nowhere else to go. Alara looked at the children, a girl of 6 and a boy of 4, both hollow-eyed with hunger, and felt something crack in her chest. "Sarah, get them food. Whatever we have, kids eat first." The man started crying when Thomas brought them bowls of vegetable stew. "Thank you. God, thank you. Save it. You're working tomorrow." Alara turned away before he could see her face, before he could see that feeding starving children was tearing holes in the armor she'd built. They named him John. The children were Mary and Peter, standard names for standard people who'd been ground up by circumstances beyond their control. The cave was crowded now. 7 people where there'd been 3. The fire had to burn hotter to keep everyone warm. Food disappeared faster than they could replenish it. And still Alara pushed, longer hours checking snares, expanding the foraging range, teaching John to fish in the creek that ran through the valley. Sarah pulled her aside on the 5th day. "We can't sustain this." "I know." "Then why are you taking them in?" "Because turning them away means they die. And I'm not ready to be the person who watches children starve because the math doesn't work." Alara's voice was flat, exhausted. "We find a way. We always find a way. And if we don't, then we all starve together instead of me starving alone. At least there's community in that." Sarah stared at her. "You've changed. People keep telling me that." "No, I mean, you're not as cold anymore, not as calculating." Sarah paused. "It's like letting people in broke something in you. Or fixed something." Alara moved toward the cave. "Either way, we don't have time to psychoanalyze. We have mouths to feed." The breakthrough came from Grace. She'd been experimenting with fermentation, trying different vegetables and ratios. And on the 7th day, she produced something that smelled vile, but tasted surprisingly good. Fermented wild onions mixed with early dandelion greens, packed in salt, and left to develop beneficial bacteria. "It's disgusting," she said proudly, "but it's calories and vitamins, and it'll last months." Alara tasted it, fought back a gag, and nodded. "Make more. As much as you can. This is how we survive until spring fully hits." Grace beamed. For the first time since losing her feet, she looked almost happy. That night, as everyone slept crammed together around the fire, Alara did the math. 7 people consuming an average of 1,500 calories each. That was over 10,000 calories a day. Their current intake was maybe 8,000 on a good day. They were still losing, but slower. Slower was something. She was calculating how many more snares they'd need when she heard it. Voices. Multiple voices. Coming up the trail in full dark. Alara was on her feet instantly, rifle in hand. "Everyone wake up! Now!" Sarah jolted awake. "What?" "Company." Armed from the sound of it, Alara moved to the cave entrance. "John, get the children to the back. Robert, if you can stand, stand. Everyone else, stay down and stay quiet." The voices grew louder, male, aggressive, and very drunk. They appeared in the firelight's reach, 4 men, all carrying tools that could double as weapons. Axes, hammers, a length of chain. The one in front smiled when he saw Alara. "Well now, heard there was a girl up here playing house. Didn't believe it till now. Alara kept the rifle steady. Turn around. Go back down the mountain. You're not welcome here. Not welcome? The man laughed. Sweetheart, we don't need your welcome. We heard you're feeding people, helping them. Thought maybe you could help us too. We don't have enough for ourselves. Can't spare anything. See, that's not what we heard. Heard you got supplies, food. Maybe even some of that gold people are hiding from the banks. He took a step forward. So here's how this works. You share what you got, we leave peaceful. You don't, we take it anyway, and you get hurt in the process. Behind Alara, Sarah had moved to her feet. Grace was gripping a knife. Even Robert had pulled himself upright, using the wall for support. Last chance, Alara said. Leave. Or what? You'll shoot me? You're a kid with a rifle you probably don't know how to use. The man took another step. Put it down before someone gets hurt. Someone's definitely getting hurt. Question is whether it's you or me. Alara's finger moved to the trigger. Your choice. The man's smile died. You're serious. As death. For a long moment, no one moved. The fire crackled. Someone in the cave whimpered. One of the children, probably. Then the man lunged. Alara fired. The shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He hit the ground screaming, and his friends froze. Next one goes center mass, Alara said, already working the bolt to chamber another round. You want to test me, but you'll die testing. The other three men looked at their bleeding friend, at the teenage girl with the smoking rifle, at the desperate people crowding behind her. The calculation happened fast. Not worth it. Not worth dying over. They grabbed their wounded friend and disappeared down the trail, his screams fading into the night. Alara stood in the entrance until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then her legs gave out and she sat down hard, the rifle clattering to the floor. You shot him, Sarah whispered. He didn't leave me a choice. You could have fired a warning shot. And waste ammunition? No. Alara's hands were shaking now, adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. Warning shots are for people with unlimited bullets. We have maybe 30 rounds total. Each one has to count. Grace had pulled herself to the entrance and was staring at the blood on the ground. They'll come back. Maybe. No, maybe about it. You humiliated them, hurt one of them. Men like that, they'll be back with more friends, more weapons. Grace's voice was grim. You just started a war. Alara looked at the blood, at the rifle, at the cave full of people depending on her to keep them alive. Grace was right. This was war now, and Alara had no idea how to win it. August arrived at dawn with news that confirmed their fears. The man you shot? That's Dale Kershaw. His brother runs the lumber operation down valley, and Dale's telling everyone you ambushed him, tried to rob him, shot him unprovoked. August's face was grim. You're not a girl helping people anymore. You're a threat, a criminal, and they're gathering a group to come deal with you. How many? Alara asked. 10, maybe 15, armed. They're talking about burning you out, taking whatever you have, making an example. Sarah had gone pale. We can't fight 15 men. No, you can't. August looked at Alara. So you run, now, before they get organized. Run where? Alara's voice was flat. Deeper into the mountains? With 7 people, 2 of them children, 1 missing her feet? She shook her head. We died before we made it 5 miles. Then you surrender, come to town, face the accusations. Maybe they'll hang me. You know it. I shot a man. Doesn't matter that it was self-defense. I'm poor, I'm young, and I'm female. That's 3 strikes before the trial even starts. Alara moved to the cave entrance and looked down the trail. Running means dying slow. Surrendering means dying fast, so we do the only thing left, which is, we fight. Sarah grabbed her arm. Alara, we can't. We can, and we will. Alara pulled away. You think they're going to stop at me? They come up here. They find all of you, witnesses, people who can contradict their story. They'll kill everyone to protect their version of events. Grace spoke from her corner, her voice steady despite her condition. The girl's right. We're all dead if they come. Only question is whether we die on our feet or our knees. There's another option, August said quietly. You could send everyone else away. Keep just yourself. Face them alone. They want you, not them. Maybe they kill me and leave everyone else alone. That's not a strategy, that's hope. Alara turned to face him. And hope is how you die disappointed. Then what's your plan? 7 people against 15? Alara looked around the cave. At Sarah, who could shoot now but wasn't confident. At Grace, who couldn't walk but could think. At John, who had the build of someone who'd worked hard labor. At Robert, who hated her but hated being threatened more. At Thomas and the children, who were too young to fight but old enough to help. We use the terrain. The cave gives us a defensive position. They have to come to us, funnel through a narrow entrance, and they can't bring superior numbers to bear all at once. She moved to the limestone shelf and started sketching in spilled flour. We set traps on the trail, tripwires, pitfalls if we have time. Anything that slows them down and hurts them before they even reach us. That's not fighting, that's guerrilla warfare, August said. Call it what you want. I call it survival. Alara looked up. You with us or against us? August was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm too old to fight, but I know where to get more ammunition, and I know which men in town might be sympathetic to your cause. I can't promise an army, but I can promise you won't be completely alone. That's enough. Alara turned to the others. Everyone who can work, we're fortifying. Now. We have maybe a day before they organize. That's not much time. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon with desperate focus. John and Robert, working together for the first time without hostility, dug a pit 15 feet from the cave entrance, covering it with branches and leaves. Sarah and Alara strung tripwires across the trail at ankle height, attaching them to rocks that would clatter and alert them to anyone approaching. Grace coordinated from inside the cave, her sharp mind planning sight lines and defensive positions. Thomas and the children gathered stones for throwing, not lethal but painful and disorienting. By nightfall, the approach to the cave was a gauntlet of traps and obstacles, not enough to stop 15 determined men, but enough to slow them, to hurt them, to make them reconsider. Alara stood at the cave entrance as the sun set, looking down at their handiwork. Behind her, the others prepared for a siege they might not survive. We should pray, John said softly. Pray if you want. I'm going to sharpen knives. Alara moved back inside. Prayers don't stop bullets, but sharp steel might. Sarah followed her. You're terrified. I can see it. Of course I'm terrified. I'm about to fight 15 men with 7 people, half of whom can't actually fight. Alara's hands shook as she worked the whetstone. But being terrified doesn't mean being helpless. It means being aware of the stakes. If we die, we don't. We can't. Alara looked up and her eyes were fierce. Because if we die, everyone like us dies. Everyone who was thrown away and told they don't matter. We're proof that they're wrong, that we can build something from nothing, that we matter. Her voice dropped. So we don't get to die. We have to win. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm glad you're terrified. Means you're still human. Barely. That night, they took turns on watch. Alara had the midnight shift, and she sat at the cave entrance with the rifle across her lap and her mind churning through scenarios. 15 men. Maybe 10 would actually fight. The others would be hangers-on, people who talked big but ran when blood started flowing. Of those 10, maybe half would break when the first one died, which meant she had to kill someone, had to cross that line from wounding to ending. Her hands tightened on the rifle. She'd shot Dale Kershaw to stop him, not kill him, but stopping wouldn't be enough this time. This time she'd have to go further. Could she? The question hung in the cold night air, unanswered. At dawn, August returned with 3 men, farmers who'd heard about the cave and were sympathetic. They brought 2 more rifles and a sense of grim determination. Not much, August said, but it's what I could get. It's enough. Alara distributed the weapons. Anyone who can shoot, you're on the firing line. Everyone else, your support. Water, ammunition, tending wounds. One of the farmers, a man named Joseph with weathered hands and kind eyes, looked around the cave. You really think you can hold against Kershaw's mob? I think we don't have a choice but to try. He nodded slowly. My daughter's your age, 17. She's pregnant and the father ran off, and everyone in town looks at her like she's trash. He checked his rifle. I'm fighting for her, so she knows she matters even when the world says she doesn't. Alara felt something tighten in her chest. Then let's make sure she knows. They didn't have to wait long. The mob appeared on the trail just after noon. Alara counted 14 men, all armed with whatever they'd found: hunting rifles, axes, even farming implements converted to weapons. Dale Kershaw was at the front, his arm in a sling and his face twisted with rage. "Alara Vance, come out and face justice." Alara stepped into the cave entrance, rifle ready. "Justice for what?" "Defending myself against thieves." "You shot me. You threatened to rob me. I defended my property. That's not a crime." Her voice carried down the trail. "You want to press charges? Do it through the sheriff. Coming up here with a mob makes you the criminal." "Sheriff's in our pocket, girl. He's not going to help you." Dale took a step forward. "Last chance. Come down peaceful, and maybe we go easy on you." "Last chance," Alara echoed. "Turn around and maybe I don't kill half of you before you reach the cave." Dale laughed. "You and what army?" On cue, the three farmers stepped into view behind Alara, then Sarah, then John, holding an axe. The mob hesitated. "This army," Alara said, "small but motivated. We've got high ground, defensive positions, and nothing to lose. You've got numbers and anger. Question is whether your anger's worth dying over." One of the men in the mob, younger, maybe 18, spoke up. "Dale, maybe we should—" "Shut up." Dale's face had gone red. "They're scared. Look at them. One good push and they'll break." He started forward and stepped directly into the first tripwire. The rocks came crashing down and Dale went sprawling. The men behind him scattered, and one of them found the pit trap the hard way, his scream cutting through the afternoon. "Fire!" Alara's voice cracked like a whip. The farmers fired, not aiming to kill but to wound, to scare, to make the mob understand this wasn't going to be easy. 2 more men went down, the rest scattered into the trees, finding cover. And then the real fight began. Bullets tore through the air. Someone was screaming. Alara fired, reloaded, fired again, her mind blank except for the mechanical process of survival. Beside her, Sarah was shooting with grim determination, and the farmers were holding the line. But the mob had numbers. They were flanking, moving through the trees, getting closer. "Fall back!" Alara shouted. "Into the cave!" They retreated, and the mob pressed forward. 3 men reached the entrance, and Alara shot the first one point blank. He went down hard, blood spreading across the stone. Dead. She'd killed him. No time to process. The second man was swinging an axe, and John met him with his own, the 2 weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. The third made it past them, into the cave, and went straight for Grace. Thomas stepped into his path. The boy had found the knife, Alara's knife, the one August had given her. He held it wrong, grip too tight, stance too wide. But when the man reached for him, Thomas drove the blade into his leg with all the desperate strength an 8-year-old could muster. The man screamed and fell, and Sarah was there, swinging a burning branch from the fire into his face. He fled, burning and bleeding, and the mob's resolve broke. They were running now, dragging their wounded, leaving the dead. Dale Kershaw was the last to retreat, his face a mask of impotent rage. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Alara called back. "Come back and we'll kill you all. Tell that to whoever's listening in town." The mob disappeared down the trail, and the cave fell silent except for ragged breathing and the crackle of fire. Alara looked around. Everyone was alive. Wounded. John had a gash on his arm, Sarah's hands were burned from the branch, Thomas was shaking so hard his teeth chattered, but alive. And at the cave entrance lay one dead man, his eyes staring at nothing. Alara walked to the body and stared down at it. She'd done this. Ended a life. Crossed a line she could never uncross. "We need to bury him," Joseph said quietly. "No." Alara's voice was hollow. "We leave him. Let the mob see him when they come back for their dead. Let them understand the cost. That's cold. That's survival." She turned away from the corpse. "We won today, but Grace was right. This is war now. And in war, you don't hide the casualties. You display them. You make the enemy understand that every step forward costs blood." Sarah was staring at her with something like horror. "Who are you?" Alara met her eyes. "I'm whoever I need to be to keep us alive." That night, they reinforced the defenses and tended their wounds and tried not to think about the dead man at their entrance. But Alara couldn't stop thinking about it. Couldn't stop seeing his face in the moment the bullet struck. couldn't stop feeling the weight of having ended a life. She'd become a killer. And somewhere down the mountain, Dale Kershaw and his mob were regrouping, planning, coming back with more men and more weapons and more determination. The siege had just begun, and Alara realized with cold clarity that this fight wouldn't end until either the mob was destroyed or the cave was burned to the ground with everyone inside. There was no middle ground anymore, no compromise, just survival or death. She loaded the rifle with steady hands and took her position at the cave entrance, watching the trail as darkness fell and the temperature dropped, and somewhere in the valley below, her enemies gathered for. They came at dawn 3 days later. Not 15 men this time. 30. Maybe more. Alara watched them gather at the base of the trail through the pale morning light, her hand steady on the rifle despite the fear clawing at her ribs. August had brought word the night before. The town council had met. Dale Kershaw had convinced them that the cave represented a threat to order, to property, to everything decent people held sacred. They deputized every able-bodied man willing to carry a weapon. This wasn't a mob anymore. It was an army. "We can't win this," Sarah said quietly beside her. "I know." "Then why are we still here?" Alara looked back at the cave, at Grace teaching Mary and Peter how to sort seeds, at John sharpening weapons with grim determination, at Thomas sitting beside his father. Robert had finally started talking to his son without cruelty. Something about facing death together softening whatever had been broken in him. Because running means they win, means everything we built was for nothing. Alara chambered around. If we're going down, we go down proving we mattered. The army started up the trail. They moved carefully, expecting traps, and found them. The first pit claimed 2 men. Tripwires sent 3 more tumbling, but there were so many that the losses barely slowed them. Alara fired the first shot when they reached 100 yards. A man spun and fell. The farmers fired next, and the morning exploded with gunfire. But the army kept coming. They had too many guns, too much ammunition, too much organizational backing. Within minutes, the cave's defenders were pinned down, unable to lift their heads without drawing fire. "We're done," Joseph gasped, blood seeping from a wound in his shoulder. "They're going to overrun us." Alara's mind raced through options and found nothing. No escape route, no reinforcements, no miracle, just the certainty of defeat. Then a voice cut through the gunfire, amplified and official. "Hold your fire!" The shooting stopped. Alara risked a look and saw a man in a sheriff's uniform standing at the head of the army, hands raised. "Alara Vance." "I'm Sheriff Mitchell. You're surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and we'll take you into custody peacefully. No one else has to die today." Alara stood slowly, keeping the rifle pointed down. "And if I don't? Then we storm the cave and everyone inside dies. Your choice." Sarah grabbed her arm. "Don't! Don't you dare!" "It's over, Sarah." Alara's voice was hollow. "We lost. Best I can do now is make sure the rest of you survive." "No, we fight together or not at all. You have children to protect. I don't." Alara pulled away gently. "Take care of them. All of them. Build what we started." She paused. "And tell Thomas he was braver than any man out there." Before Sarah could stop her, Alara stepped out of the cave, hands raised, rifle hanging from one hand. The army tensed. Guns tracked her movement. "I'm Alara Vance," she called. "The one you want. Let everyone else go and I'll surrender." Sheriff Mitchell studied her, a 17-year-old girl, hollow-eyed and exhausted, standing alone against 30 armed men. "You killed 2 men. Self-defense. They attacked first. That's not what witnesses say." "Then your witnesses are liars." Alara's voice was steady. "But it doesn't matter anymore. You have the power. I have nothing. So let's stop pretending this is about justice and admit it's about control." A murmur ran through the army. Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Careful, girl. You're in no position to—" "To what? Tell the truth?" Alara laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You came up here with an army to arrest one teenage girl. That tell you anything about who the real threat is?" "You shot. I defended myself and the people under my protection. Same as any man would. Same as you would if someone came to your home threatening violence." She took a step forward. Guns rose. "But I'm female and poor and don't know my place. That's my real crime, isn't it?" Mitchell's face flushed. "You're coming with us. The rest can leave." "No." The word came from behind Alara. She turned to find Sarah standing in the cave entrance, rifle in hand. Sarah, don't. If she goes, we all go. Sarah's voice was hard. You want her? You take all of us. We're a community now. We don't abandon our own. Grace appeared next, dragging herself on her arms. She's right. Take us all or take none of us. John emerged with his children. I stand with them. Even Robert limped out, leaning heavily on Thomas. Never thought I'd say this, but the girl's got more spine than most men I've known. You want her? You go through me first. The farmers joined them. Then August, moving slowly down from where he'd been watching, positioning himself between Alara and the sheriff. Well now, August said mildly, seems you've got a problem, Sheriff, because all these fine people are witnesses, and they're saying self-defense. You going to arrest them all? Mitchell's face had gone from flushed to pale. The army behind him was shifting uncomfortably. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. Arresting a violent criminal was one thing. Taking a whole community, including children, was another. This is ridiculous, Mitchell said. You're all protecting a murderer. We're protecting a girl who saved our lives, Grace interrupted. I was dying when I found this cave. She cut off my feet to save me. Most people would have let me die rather than take on that burden. I was starving, John added. My children were starving. She fed us when no one else would. She taught me I could be more than afraid, Sarah said quietly. That I didn't have to accept being beaten, being controlled. She showed me I mattered. The words hit like physical blows, and Alara felt something crack in her chest. She'd been so focused on survival, on building systems and making cold calculations, that she'd missed what she'd actually created. Not just a cave, not just a kitchen, a family. Mitchell was struggling now. The law says self-defense is legal, August said. The law says a person can protect their property. The law says you need evidence beyond the testimony of men who came to rob and got shot for their trouble. He smiled slightly. Unless you're saying the law works different for rich folks than poor ones. The army was fracturing. Alara could see it. Men lowering their weapons, backing away, uncomfortable with the optics of this. 30 armed men against a teenage girl and a collection of desperate people who'd found refuge together. It looked like tyranny, and the men who'd come up here angry were starting to realize it. Mitchell saw it too. His authority was dissolving like sugar in water. This isn't over. We'll investigate. We'll bring proper charges. You do that, August said. In the meantime, these people aren't going anywhere. They've got a legal right to be on this mountain. You want to challenge that? Get a court order. Otherwise, you're trespassing. The sheriff's mouth opened and closed. Then he turned to his army. Fall back. We're done here. But Sheriff, Dale Kershaw pushed forward, his face twisted with rage. You can't just let them. I said fall back. Mitchell's voice was iron. Unless you want to explain to a judge why you led a mob against children? Dale looked around for support and found none. The men who'd followed him up the mountain were already retreating, eager to distance themselves from what this had become. He spat at Alara's feet. This isn't over, bitch. Yes, it is. Alara's voice was quiet but absolute. Because next time you come, I won't aim for your shoulder. I'll aim for your head, and I won't miss. Dale paled. Then he turned and fled, following the dissolving army down the mountain. When they were gone, Alara's legs gave out. She sat down hard, the rifle clattering beside her, and stared at the empty trail. They'd won. Impossibly, against all odds, they'd won. Sarah sank down beside her. I thought we were dead. We should be. Alara's voice was numb. We should all be dead or in chains right now. But we're not. Because you stood up. Because you taught us to stand up. Sarah took her hand. You built something, Alara. Something that matters. Alara looked at the people gathered around her. Grace with her missing feet and fierce determination. John with his children who'd learned that community could exist even when the world fell apart. Robert and Thomas, a father and son, slowly learning to speak to each other again. The farmers who'd risked everything to defend strangers. And Sarah, who'd been so broken 6 weeks ago that she'd nearly died in the snow, now standing tall with a rifle in her hands and fire in her eyes. We built it together, Alara said softly. August chuckled. That you did, and now the whole valley's going to know about it. Word spreads fast. By tomorrow, everyone will have heard about the girl on the mountain who faced down an army. He paused. You're going to have more visitors, a lot more. People who need help. People who want to learn. You ready for that? Ilara thought about the cave, about the supplies they'd stretched impossibly thin, about the knowledge her parents had left behind, now being passed to others who'd pass it further still. No, she said honestly, but we'll figure it out. We always do. Spring came 2 weeks later with a violence that surprised everyone. The snow melted in days and the mountain exploded with green. Wild onions carpeted the slopes. Early berries appeared on bushes. The creek swelled with snowmelt, and fish ran thick in the shallows. The cave's population had grown to 12. More kept coming. Word had spread faster than August had predicted. A woman fleeing an abusive husband. A veteran with shattered nerves who couldn't hold a job. An elderly couple who'd lost their farm and had nowhere else to go. Ilara stopped turning people away. Instead, she expanded. John helped her identify other caves nearby, and they created a network of shelters. Grace, despite her disability, became the community's teacher, passing on fermentation and preservation techniques to anyone who'd listen. Sarah had become Ilara's second-in-command, the one who handled interpersonal conflicts while Ilara focused on logistics. And Thomas. Thomas had changed most of all. The boy who'd shot his father now spent his days checking snares with the skill of someone twice his age. He rarely spoke, but his eyes had lost some of their haunted quality. Robert had left 3 weeks after the standoff. His leg had healed enough to walk, and he'd approached Ilara one morning with something like shame in his eyes. "I'm going," he'd said, "back to town. Try to find work." "Okay, He'd struggled with the words. "I wanted to say thank you for not letting me die, for showing Thomas what a man should be, since I clearly couldn't." Ilara had looked at him for a long moment. "You hurt them. Your wife and son. You hurt them in ways that'll take years to heal." "I know. But you're trying to change. I saw it these past weeks. Saw you being gentle with Thomas. Being human." She'd paused. "That's worth something. Not forgiveness, but recognition." Robert had nodded and left. Sarah had watched him go with complicated emotions written across her face. "Do you think he'll change?" she'd asked. "I don't know. But he has the chance now. What he does with it is on him." On a morning in late April, Ilara stood at the cave entrance and watched the sun rise over the valley. Behind her, the cave was alive with sound, people cooking, talking, planning the day's work. The smell of bread baking mixed with wood smoke and spring flowers. August appeared on the trail, moving slowly. He'd aged in the past months, the winter taking its toll, but his eyes were still sharp. "Got news," he said. "Good or bad? Depends on your perspective." He sat heavily on a rock. "Marcus Tolliver died. Heart attack. 3 days ago." Ilara felt nothing, no satisfaction, no grief, just a distant recognition of a man who'd shaped her life, ending his own. "And his wife?" she asked quietly. "Constance? She's selling the estate, moving to Virginia to live with her sister." August pulled out a piece of paper. "But before she goes, she wanted you to have this." Ilara took the paper with numb fingers. It was a deed. The land the cave sat on, plus 50 surrounding acres, signed over to Ilara Vance. "I don't understand." "Read the back." She flipped it over. The handwriting was Constance Tolliver's, shaky now with age or emotion. "I told myself I was protecting my husband's interests, that your parents' debt entitled us to your labor, that throwing you out was justice, but the truth is simpler and more shameful. You reminded me of who I'd been before marriage refined me into something acceptable. A girl with ideas, with fire. My husband broke that in me over years, and I resented you for still having what I'd lost. Sending that man to your cave was cruelty born of envy. You survived anyway. You built something I couldn't destroy. Perhaps that makes you stronger than me. Perhaps it just makes you younger. Either way, the land is yours. Do better with it than we did. Build something that lasts. C.T." Ilara read it twice, then handed it to August. "She's not asking for forgiveness. No, just giving you the tools to succeed without her interference." August folded the deed carefully. "What are you going to do with it?" Ilara looked around, at the cave that had saved her life, at the people who'd found refuge here, at the mountains that had nearly killed her and instead made her stronger than she'd known was possible. "We expand," she said, build real structures. A kitchen that can feed 100 people, gardens, a school for the children, a place where knowledge gets shared instead of hoarded. She paused. A place where people who've been thrown away can prove they matter. August smiled. Your parents would be proud. Maybe. Alara's voice caught. I wish they could see it. They do? In every person you teach, every life you save. They're here. He stood slowly. I'm getting too old for these climbs. This might be my last visit for a while. August, don't. We both knew this was coming. I'm 73. My knees are shot and my heart's not much better. He gripped her shoulder. But I got to see you grow from a scared girl into someone who changes the world. That's enough. He walked away before she could respond, and Alara watched him disappear down the trail with tears she didn't bother to hide. Summer came, and with it, transformation. The cave became the heart of something larger. With the land legally theirs, they built a proper kitchen, stone and timber, with a massive hearth and storage that could preserve food for months. Gardens spread across the southern slope, planted with vegetables and herbs and knowledge passed down through generations. People came not just for food now, but for teaching. Alara found herself running what amounted to a survival school, showing desperate men and women how to forage, preserve, build, how to turn nothing into something. Sarah married John in a quiet ceremony by the creek. Thomas stood as witness, and Grace wept openly, the first time anyone had seen her cry since losing her feet. The children, Mary and Peter, and 3 others who'd arrived in spring, started a school under Grace's guidance. She taught them reading and arithmetic and the practical sciences Alara's father had documented. But more than that, she taught them they mattered, that their circumstances didn't define their worth. By August, the community had grown to 30 permanent residents and twice that in people who came and went, learning skills and carrying them back to the valley. And one afternoon, as Alara was teaching a group of women how to smoke fish, she looked up to see a familiar figure on the trail. Ida Caldwell, the woman who'd given her that first bundle of food when she was desperate and dying. Mrs. Caldwell. Ida looked around at the transformation, at the buildings, the gardens, the organized chaos of a functioning community. You've done well. We've done well. All of us together. Alara wiped her hands. What brings you up here? My husband died. Winter cough that turned to pneumonia. Ida's voice was matter of fact. Farm's too much for me alone. Thought maybe... She hesitated. Thought maybe you could use someone who knows crop rotation. Alara smiled. We always have room for knowledge, and for people willing to share it. Ida's shoulders sagged with relief. I can work. Won't be a burden. Nobody here's a burden. We all contribute what we can. Alara gestured toward the kitchen. Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone. As they walked, Ida spoke quietly. That day I gave you food. I thought I was helping you survive a few more days. Didn't know it would turn into this. Neither did I. But that's the thing about kindness. You never know what it'll grow into. Alara paused. Thank you for seeing me as human when most people saw me as nothing. You were never nothing, child. You just hadn't proven it yet. Ida smiled. Now you have. To everyone. What? Fall brought its own changes. August died in his sleep on a Tuesday in October. They found him in his chair, the journal Alara had lent him open on his lap, a peaceful expression on his weathered face. They buried him on the mountain, in a spot overlooking the valley where he'd spent 73 years. Sarah read from Alara's journal, passages her mother and father had written about community and knowledge, and the obligation to pass both forward. Thomas placed a stone on the grave. He taught me it's okay to be scared as long as you don't let fear stop you. Grace added her own stone. He taught me losing my feet didn't mean losing my purpose. One by one, they added stones until the grave was covered, each rock representing a lesson learned, a life changed, a moment of grace in a harsh world. Alara stayed after everyone left, sitting beside the mound of stones as the sun set. You were right, she said to the grave. About community, about building instead of hoarding, about... Her voice broke. About everything. The wind carried her words down the mountain, and in the valley below, lights began to appear as families settled in for the evening. Families who knew that if things got desperate, there was a place on the mountain. A girl who'd teach them to survive. A community that would welcome them. August had called it a legacy. Alara called it payment for every kindness shown, every lesson learned, every moment someone had chosen to help instead of hurt. Winter returned, but this time they were ready. The storerooms were full, the caves were insulated. The community had grown skilled enough that no one went hungry, no one froze, no one had to choose between dignity and survival. On a night in early December, almost exactly a year after Marcus Tolliver had thrown her into the snow, Alara sat by the fire in the main cave, now just one of many, but still the heart of everything, and opened her parents' journal. She'd filled the blank pages with her own entries over the months, notes on preservation techniques, records of who'd come and gone, observations about human nature and community building. But now she turned to a fresh page and wrote, December 10th, 1935. 1 year ago, I was thrown away, told I didn't exist, told I didn't matter. Today, I fed 37 people, taught 15 more, gave hope to countless others just by existing, just by refusing to disappear. Marcus Tolliver was wrong. His wife was wrong. Everyone who looked at me and saw nothing was wrong. I exist, loudly, defiantly, completely, and I'm taking everyone they threw away with me. She closed the journal and looked around the cave, at Sarah sitting with Thomas, helping him with his reading, at Grace teaching 2 new arrivals the basics of fermentation, at John playing with his children, their laughter echoing off stone walls, at the life they'd built from nothing. Someone knocked at the cave entrance, a timid, desperate sound Alara recognized. Another arrival, another person the world had decided didn't matter. Sarah looked up. Want me to get it? No, I will. Alara stood and moved to the entrance. Outside stood a girl, maybe 15, hollow-eyed and shaking. Behind her, the winter night pressed down with killing cold. I heard... The girl's voice was barely a whisper. I heard there was a place, a girl who helps people, who teaches them to survive. Alara looked at her, saw herself a year ago, desperate and dying and absolutely alone. Saw every person who'd ever been told they were worthless, disposable, better off gone. She stepped aside. Come in. You're safe here. The girl hesitated like she'd been tricked too many times to trust easy kindness. Alara understood that too. I'm Alara, she said gently. What's your name? Jane Cooper. My family kicked me out. They said that I brought shame. Tears cut tracks through the dirt on her face. It doesn't matter what they said. You're here now. You're safe. And you're going to learn that you matter, no matter what anyone told you. Alara guided her toward the fire. Sarah, get her some food and a blanket. She's half frozen. As Sarah moved to help, Alara caught her eye. A moment of understanding passed between them. This was the work. This was what they'd built. Not just a kitchen or a cave or even a community. A promise. That no one would be thrown away again. That knowledge and kindness would be passed forward, person to person, life to life, until the very act of caring became unstoppable. Jane ate like she was dying, and when she finished, she looked at Alara with something like hope. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow you start learning how to forage, how to preserve, how to survive. Alara smiled. And after that you teach someone else. That's the price of staying here. You pass it on. I don't know anything worth teaching. You will. We all did. Alara looked around at the cave, at the people who'd come here broken and were slowly becoming whole. This place changes you, not into something else, into who you were always meant to be. Jane's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was going to die out there. We all did, but we didn't. We survived, and now we help others do the same. Alara stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new start. As Jane settled by the fire, wrapped in blankets and warmth and the first real safety she'd felt in months, Alara walked to the cave entrance and looked out at the winter night. Somewhere down there, Marcus Tolliver's estate sat empty. Constance had left for Virginia and wouldn't return. The land that had consumed her parents' lives was now legally hers, transformed from a symbol of debt into a foundation for something better. The cold bit at her face, but Alara didn't retreat. She stood in the entrance and let the winter try to break her one more time. It couldn't, because she wasn't that scared girl anymore. Wasn't alone anymore. Wasn't fighting for mere survival anymore. She was building a legacy. creating something that would outlive her, outlive them all. Proving with every meal cooked, every lesson taught, every desperate soul welcomed into warmth, that the people the world threw away were the ones who changed it. Marcus Tolliver had been right about one thing. She didn't exist as she had before. That girl was gone. In her place stood something fiercer, something that understood the brutal mathematics of survival but chose kindness anyway, something that knew how to kill but preferred to teach, something that had been broken by the world and used the pieces to build a refuge for everyone else the world had tried to break. Behind her, the cave buzzed with life, conversations and laughter and the sound of people discovering they mattered. In front of her, the mountains stretched endlessly upward, and she knew that somewhere in those peaks were other caves, other possibilities, other chances to prove that discarded didn't mean worthless. The fire would keep burning, the knowledge would keep spreading, the community would keep growing, and Alora Vance, thrown into the snow at 16 and told she didn't exist, would make damn sure the world never forgot she'd been here. She turned back to the warmth, to the people waiting, to the life she'd chosen over death. The cold clawed at her back one last time, trying to reclaim her. She closed the hide curtain and shut it out forever. Inside, the fire burned bright, and the future, impossible, defiant, absolutely real, waited to be built. P.